Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on What If Naruto Was God of Pyramid. But before we start, I want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. It was another typical day in Water Country in Kurigakure no Sato. The sky was cloudy, mist covered the landscape, and the scent of rain filled the air. It is a very gloomy place to live, but the people of this country were fine with it since the mist makes the village and the country difficult for foreigners to find it. A young boy and girl were playing in the streets of a village outside Kiri. Their names are Mikuru and Ayaka Uzumaki Uchiha, and they are twins. Both have black hair with a blue tint, heterochromia eyes, the left eye is violet while the right eye is onyx, and fair skin. They wore a blue shirt under a sleeveless hooded brown jacket with a red whirlpool spiral on the back, gray cargo pants, and black sandals. Mikuru hairstyle was like that of Itachi but spiky on top of his head, while Ayaka looked like a raven-haired Kushina in appearance. Their parents met near the end of the Third Shinobi World War when their father, Ichiro Uchiha, a Jonin-level shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato and an outcast for caring more about Konoha than he did with the Uchiha clan, was injured in battle. He stayed behind to hold off the advancing Iwa shinobi while his teammates escaped. The battle turned for the worst and he fell into a river from an explosion caused by the Iwa shinobi's explosive tags. That was when their mother, Masaki Uzumaki, a Jonin-level kunoichi of Kiri, saved him and putted him from the river to safety. When he woke up, she was an angel who saved him from death. He then told her who he was and she promised that when he recovered, she planned to return him to Konoha, but he decided against it. He had no love for the clan and the clan could care less about what happened to him. He asked to take him with her. When she took him to her battle group, they were reluctant of him joining Kiri at first. However, when he told them his past and that he wanted to start a new life, they relaxed slightly. He then proved him worth in combat and gradually fell in love with Masaki. They then fled Kiri when it became known as the Chigiri. Their parents built a house outside of a nearby town. They chose outside the town over inside the town because they did not want the villagers to know they possess the Kekkei Genkei of both the Uchiha and Uzumaki clans. The people of this land feared and hated anyone who possessed a Kekkei Genkei in their blood, which is why their older brothers upped and left 2 years ago never to be seen again. They were running down the street laughing when ran into a group of preteens and fell on their buttock. The two groaned in pain, rubbing their foreheads before looked up at the group they bumped into. Their eyes widened upon seeing them. Standing before them was a blonde boy with green eyes, a silver-haired girl with blue eyes, and a brunette-haired boy with red eyes, whom the leader of the group. They all were around 12 to 13 years old. They all bore Kiri forehead projectors and looked to be at Genin level. "Hey you brats, watch where you're going," the brown-haired boy yelled with annoyance. "I'm sorry." The boy apologized with a bow. "We did not see you there." "Well, next time watching where you're running into. Brats like you should know better than to bump into a shinobi. You might end up dead if you're not careful," the female teammate growled. Mikuru narrowed his eyes at that and said in an emotionless tone, "Hey, why did you say that? We told you that we were sorry. If you cannot accept that, then you all are nothing more than a bunch of cold-hearted, stuck-up, breathless nobodies that don't deserve to be called ninja." The Genin squad stared at them dumbfounded with their mouths hanging open. The boy looked at his twin sister and jerked his head to the right. "Come on Ayaka, let's go home," he said with annoyance. She looked at him astonished and nodded with a smile. They both took their leave as the Genin had anger started to show on their faces. They were 2 blocks away from home when same squad of Kiri Genin appeared out of nowhere and blocked their path. The leader of the group was red in the face with anger as was the others. The boy stared at them with an annoyed look. "Hey, get out of our way. We need to get home," he utters with annoyance and continues to push past them. Which made tick mark appeared on the brown-haired boy's forehead. "Who are you calling breathless nobodies?" he yelled as he punched the boy in face, knocking him to the ground. Mikuru, are you okay?" Ayaka cried before kneeling down beside him. Mikuru spit some blood out of the side of his mouth and nodded. "Yeah Ayaka," he replied as he got to his feet. Mikaru was ready to punch back when they pulled out kunai. You are not allowed to attack civilians. That's not the way of the shinobi, Mikaru growled with anger. They just make an evil laugh. Like we care, brats. First, we will kill you, then we will dispose of you. Nobody would care if you two die. Mikaru narrowed his eyes dangerously. Our parents will. Besides, if Mizukage-sama found out what you did, you all would be in deep trouble. They all just laughed even louder than before. He wouldn't care. If a civilian insults a shinobi, they are allowed to kill him or her on sight, the leader said with a menacing smile. Mikaru and Ayaka gasped in horror and disbelief. You're lying. The Mizukage would never allow such a thing. Mikaru yells nervously. That caused them to smirk even more. Sinisterly. Oh, but why do you think that? Called Kurigakure, Shigiri no Sato. They asked, readying their kunai. Mikaru's eyes widen in terror for a moment before growling at them. He starts backing up and grabs Ayaka's hand. Ayaka, run, he whispers to her, which she looks and nods. They both turned around on their heels and ran as fast as they could. The academy students grinned ear to ear. Humph, too easy, the blonde member stated with arrogant confidence. They all threw their kunai at them, expecting them to hit when they dodged them and launched into the air. They landed and raced across the rooftops. They stared at them with a "how can they do that" look for a second, then growls. After them, the brown-haired boy yelled as he and his group raced after them. Deep in the forest, Mikaru and Ayaka continued running through the deepest part of the forest when they came across an old temple. It looked like a temple, but more like a pyramid due to the smooth triangular shape. What is that, Mikaru? Ayaka asked curiously, but also cautiously. I am not sure, but it looks like a pyramid, Mikaru replied as he walked up the step with Ayaka in tow. As soon as he and Ayaka made halfway up the flight of stairs, they heard a voice shouting behind them. Hey, look, there they are. Come on, guys, let's get them. The leader of the genin team shouted. Mikaru and Ayaka turned their heads halfway and looked over their shoulders to see the group coming straight at them. Ayaka, run now, hurry, he shouted as he started to run up the stairs. Ayaka soon joined her brother running up the stairs. They quickly ran up the rest of the stairs and into the temple with the academy students hot on their tails. They ran inside and, unknowingly, stepped on a tile that started S. Inking and caused a door to a secret room somewhere in the pyramid to open. Inside the room, about 36 warriors, 12 drones, 6 runners, 12 predallions, and 6 praetorians were cryogenically frozen, sitting on the floor in fetal positions. Suddenly, the warm air started to heat their bodies and they all started waking up. They all made a high-pitched shriek and shock off the ice buildup covering them. The largest of the praetorians hissed to the others. We must free our mother. But first, we must find and kill the human or hunter intruders. The others nodded and ordered the warriors and runners to scatter with a growl. In the central core of the pyramid, doors in the floor with chains going inside them opened up. The chains then pulled out the alien queen in cryogenic stasis from her cryogenic chamber. She too was awakened by electrical shocks and breaks of the ice buildup on her. She moves her head out of her crest and makes a high-pitched shrieking roar, showing her whitish silver teeth and opening inner jaw. Picture the scene in AVP when Alien Queen has been awakened. Mikaru and Ayaka continued running through a series of corridors and before long, they came to a dead end. Hey Mikaru, look at that, Ayaka shouted with interest. Shish, keep it quiet Ayaka, you don't want them to find us now, do you? Mikaru whispered to her angrily before he saw what Ayaka wanted him to see. She was looking at what looked like to be a sarcophagus. What is it? She asked, touching it curiously. I don't know, Mikaru replied quietly. But it looks like a sarcophagus. He walked up to it and stopped beside Ayaka. And how do you know that? Ayaka asked suspiciously, raising an eyebrow. I read about it in the library, he replied, then gave her a smirk. You should try it sometime. Ayaka snorts and crosses her arms with a pout. He then blows the dust off it and it had what looked like a commendation lock. It had 3 of them, all in kanji. The one on the left said, days. The one on the right said, months, and the one in the middle said, years, in kanji. Mikaru looks closer at the dials and notices that the last time it was open was 100 years ago. Mikaru decided to try using today's date. He started setting today's date on the day's lock when Ayaka asked him quietly. Mikaru, what are you doing? I think it is a commendation lock for some kind of calendar. I'm putting in today's date to see if anything happens, Mikaru explained as he was on now what I think is the month's lock. You sure this is going to work? She asked. Honestly, I don't know. He replied as he moved on to the year's lock. When he finished setting it, nothing happened at first, but then a slot popped out of the front. The writing above it reads, if you are a member of a clan and wish to open this, beware. Inside is a dangerous summon contract that unleashes cunning, fierce, deadly, and unpredictable serpents. If you have the courage and determination to control and taming these great serpents, then bid you thumb and place it on the thumb slot. After reading aloud, Mikaru looked at Ayaka who nodded, nervously before he bit his thumb and placed it on the slot. Suddenly, the slot snapped back in and the sarcophagus came to life with steam rushing between the cracks before it started opening. He and Ayaka backed up a bit and Ayaka grabbed onto him screaming. What happening Mikaru? I don't know. Back up, he shouted to her. When it stopped with a thud, Mikaru went up to see inside it and found something interesting. Oh my god, Ayaka, take a look at this. Mikaru said to Ayaka with excitement in his voice. She came up and was surprised as much as he was. Inside was what we thought were 3 weird weapons of some kind and a summoning contract above them. I gasped while Ayaka just stared in awe. Wow, was all that Ayaka could manage to say. Unknown to them, somewhere in the universe, a homing beacon was activated. At the Predator's home world. On the Predator's home world, a Yautja was resting in his chair when he heard the homing beacon being activated. He activated the hub that was built into the chair, which came up from the headrest, craved over, and stopped right in front of his face. The screen came to life and showed him the location of the beacon. It was coming from the pyramid in Earth's water country. He pressed a few buttons and moved something on the control panel forward to zoom in on the pyramid. It then showed an inferred image appeared on the screen and 2 figures appeared in the room with the sarcophagus that contained the plasma casters for training unblooded Yautjas and the summoning contract that the humans created with serpents. However, it was sealed away after they learned the hard way that serpents could not be controlled. He then deactivated the headset and rotated his chair. As he came into view, you can see that his face has 4 scar marks made by a serpent. When it slashed his face, he roars as he gets up from his chair, startling 2 other predators of his clan. He makes a series of grunts and growls to tell them to get ready as he goes into his weapons storage room with the others. They all grabbed one of their bio masks, a plasma caster, a combi stick, some shuriken, a net gun, and a whip. They then boarded a starship and flew off the planet towards Earth. Meanwhile, inside the pyramid. Hey Ayaka, we need to go home and tell Kachan and Tochan about this, Mikaru said to Ayaka as he picks up the contract and seals the strange weapons into a scroll. She turned and nodded in agreement. I agree, let's go. Sorry, but that won't be happening, a voice said behind them which caused them to flinch in surprise. We slowly turned around to see the genin staring at us, triumphantly. Panic started to set in as they started sweat, their eyes started to widen and turn watery in fear, and their bodies started to shake. As they moved towards them, Mikaru and Ayaka backed up until they were against the sarcophagus. They continued walking until they were an inch away and just laughed at them. You 2 ready for your slow and painful deaths? The leader of the team asked with an evil face. Just then, Ayaka started to cry and Mikaru stood in front of her. There was no one to help them and both Mikaru and Ayaka knew it. Like anyone would help them besides their parents. They readied their fists but stopped. Mikaru yelled. Fine then, if we're going down, then I'm going down fighting. He then charged at them. I'll protect my sister with my life if I have to. Mikaru threw a punch at the leader who sideswiped it and kneed him in the stomach, caused him to gasp and cough with some saliva. Mikaru then doubled over before the group slammed him to the floor. Mikaru, no, please, stop it, someone, anyone, help us please. Ayaka cried. The academy students laughed evilly. Sorry but no one's here to help you too, the leader said, grabbing Ayaka and kneed her before throwing her over to Mikaru and landed beside him. They started beating and kicking them so hard that they coughed up blood. Mikaru and Ayaka curled up into balls and cried as the academy students continued to beat them up senseless. Then suddenly, something dropped from the ceiling behind them, slowly raised its head, and shrieked angrily, jaws open showing its secondary jaws clicking together. They turned around and screaming bloody murder at what they saw, then run by it for the entrance to the temple dodging it as it leapt at them. As soon as they left, Mikaru and Ayaka laid there on the floor and put our legs together with our arms around them and our heads on them hurt and lonely, and started to sob. The dark, humanoid creature that scared off the academy students turned its sights on the twins and hissed as it slowly crept towards the two. They looked up at it frightened and backed up against the sarcophagus, which caused it to smirk, showing metallic teeth with drool dripping from its mouth as it stopped 3 meters away from them. Its height was that of an average human and had an elongated, cylindrical skull with a textured ribbed design but possesses no visible eyes and had segmented and blade-tipped tails. The tails have a flat ridge of spines at the base of the blade with the blade being long and spear-like. It has a skeletal, biomecha, nickel appearance and colored in muted shade of black. Its body has 4 long, dorsal tubes and 1 dorsal spine on its back. Its hands had 4 clawed digits and feet, which were human-like, had 4 clawed digits with 2 toe-like appendages at the keel of each foot and the legs being in a plantigrade posture. Look at the pictures the warrior alien or hunter alien on my profile to get a better picture of it. It let out a long hiss that echoed throughout the entire pyramid. Then soon, more of them crawled out from the shadows. Some of them were different from the others. They had a smooth carapace unlike the others. They were primarily quadrupedal, walking on all 4s. Having digitigrade's hind legs, their skin was colored in muted shade of bronze. They lacked the dorsal tubes unlike the other creatures, and had longer tails and larger blades than the other ones. Look at the pictures the runner alien on my profile to get a better picture of it. Soon, about a dozen stood behind the leader and stared at them, hissing and snarling. The leader charged at them and leapt at them with a shriek. Mikaru and Ayaka, who picked up the kunai the bullies dropped, screamed, turned their heads away closing their eyes, and held up the kunai out in defense. A loud shriek of pain was heard, causing them both to open their eyes and turn to see the creature that attacked them backing up whole. Ding a hand over 2 stab wounds on its chest. It hissed angrily at them and they both saw yellowish-green blood that was dripping from its wounds. It dripped onto the ground and started hissing in ting holes into the tiles on ground and the kunai in their hands. Acidic blood. They both thought, eyes widened in shock as they looked down at the kunai they dropped, then to each other. The other creatures soon charged and jumped at them, snarling and shrieking. Mikaru and Ayaka suddenly felt an upsurge of power as they got up onto their feet and saw that the creatures appeared to be moving in slow motion as easily dodged them. Mikaru and Ayaka looked at each and were shocked at what they saw. They both had the Sharingan with 2 tomos in each eye. Mikaru, is this? Ayaka asked as she looked at her hands and saw chakra in and around them. Yeah, it is Ayaka. It is the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai, the Sharingan. I can see our chakra, Mikaru replied and explained to Ayaka. She stared at him, shocked before looking back at her hands. Their mother taught them how to use chakra chains and told them not to use it unless their lives were in danger. Their father never taught them how to use or activate the Sharingan, but only he told them that the Sharingan could not be used or activated unless the user unlocks it first in a life-threatening situation. However, he did teach them fire release technique, another jutsu that the Uchiha are known for. Now, it looks like they have met those requirements and have activated their Sharingan for the first time. They both looked up in SMIR, Ked at the warriors and runners that snarled at them and charged and leapt at them again with a shriek, but this time they had a surprise for them. Mikaru and Ayaka jumped up, dodging them as they collided with the sarcophagus and landed behind them before going through a series of hand seals. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Then, they inhaled a lung full of air and launched a massive fireball that engulfed the now surprised warriors that were now being torched alive. They now heard the dying cries of the burning warriors and runners. When the cries of the fallen warriors and runners subsided, they heard a blood-curdling roar from behind us, which caused Mikaru and Ayaka turned around to see what it was, only to be knocked backwards by a segmented and blade-tipped tail. They NDED on the ground in front of the sarcophagus with a cry of pain, their Sharingan deactivating. Mikaru and Ayaka looked up to see two completely different aliens with more warriors and runners creeping towards them. The new creatures were like the others, but had a larger and bulkier body with a muted shade of green and gray. They have 4 mandibles on their faces, tentacle-like dreadlocks hanging at the back of their heads. And the blade at the tip of its tail had a jagged point at the back of it like the tip of the predator's wrist blades and a hole in the middle of the blade. Look at the pictures the Predallion on my profile to get a better picture of it. Mikaru and Ayaka tried to stand up to fight, but could not and lay there helplessly, staring in terror as they waited for the creatures to kill them. Stop! A feminine voice roared out from the shadows, causing the warriors, runners, and the 2 Predallions to halt and turn with a shriek except for the Predallions who growled. 6 enormous creatures emerged from the shadows and walked over to the 2. They were like the warriors, but larger and had middle toes that were larger than the other 2. 4 of them had a crest at the back of their heads with 3 points, long arms with 6 fingers, hourglass-shaped bodies, and 6 dorsal spines on their backs. 2 of 6 were different from the others as 4 of them were colored in muted shade of gray. 2 looked just like the Predallions, except for the large flat head crest at the back of its head. Look at the pictures the Praetorians on my profile to get a better picture of it. With them were creatures that looked exactly like the warriors, but had a smooth carapace like the runners and like them and were shorter than the 2. Look at the pictures the Dome Warrior or drone on my profile to get a better picture of it. The largest one of the 6 sniffed Mikaru and Ayaka and then at the grinned. Take them with us, it said turning to the Predallions before it went back into the shadows with the warriors. This caused Mikaru and Ayaka's eyes to widen in horror before they tried to crawl away. See this, the Predallions grinned at their futile attempt to escape as they grabbed and dragged away the now screaming Mikaru and Ayaka into the shadows that moments later passed out from absolute terror. At the central chamber of the pyramid. An hour later, Mikaru shot his eyes open and panted heavily. He slowly sat up and looked to his left to see Ayaka still unconscious. He at that moment moved over to her too and started trying to shaking her awake. Ayaka, wake up, Mikaru said as he shook her. Ayaka moaned and stirred a bit then, slowly opened her onyx eyes. Mikaru, where are we? She asked with a sleepy but puzzled look. So, you both are finally awake? A feminine voice asked, causing the 2 to tense up and look to their right. Suspended in mid-air by a few chains and locks, a larger creature than the enormous creatures they saw earlier stared straight at them and grinned. The alien queen from AVP and the new Aliens vs. Predator game. Mikaru and Ayaka stared at her, shell-shocked. Why, you can talk? Mikaru asked, surprised. Why, yes, she replied with a smile and chuckle. My children and I are more evolved and altered versions of the original xenomorphs, or what your people sometimes call us. Uchuhenka. Bring them to me, daughter. She ordered as one of the other larger creatures appeared behind them. Yes, Kassan, she replied as she grabbed them and brought them to her mother. She then grabs them with long arms and lifts them up to her face, which causes both of them to tremble in fear. She smiles as it caressed Mikaru with its smaller hand, then Ayaka, too, before releasing them. We stared at it relaxed, but traumatized. They thought it was going to kill them for killing her children, so why was she doing this? Hey, you two all right? She then asked in gentle voice and chuckled. Why, yes, they replied in a shaken voice. B but, W, who are you? I'm Irionkohi. I am a xenomorph queen, Uchuhenka Ohi, or alien queen, if you will, a genetically engineered alien species created by another species of alien called engineers. We were brought here to these training grounds by another alien species called Yautjas, or predators, in your language, to be fought and killed by teenaged Yautjas so they can prove that they have what takes to be an adult and join their clan on their hunts across the universe, she replied with a hint of sadness in her voice. She shakes it off then, reaches an arm out, but they both took a step back. What the matter? She asked, tilted her head slightly, puzzled by their actions. Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you. Mikaru laughed a bit in disbelief. Oh, really? Well, for your information, your warriors tried to kill us a while ago. Mikaru replied angrily. Oh, sorry about that, children. We thought you were teenage predators that came here to be blooded and summoned us. We Also didn't like humans that much and we don't usually allow them to live, she explained as bowed her head, apologetically. Then why didn't you kill us already? Mikaru growled as he and Ayaka activated their Sharingan again. Because you both are different than the other humans, she said with a gentle smile. That took both Mikaru and Ayaka by surprise. I know how you feel. The pain you two went through, she said in gentle tone. They both flinched as recognized that tone. Their mother uses that same tone. What? They asked in shock. I know you two went through life with nothing but misery, but I also know you want power. Power to protect, to heal, and to help the ones you care about, Irionko, he said calmly. Mikaru and Ayaka were taken by surprise. Power they always wanted. So, I want to ask two of you something. She said in response. What? What is it? They asked, still deep in shock. Irionko, he made a sad sigh, then asked desperately, would you please release me from these chains? I have been chained here for 100 years and want to return to my home with my children. If you do this, I will give you both a well-deserved reward. They both stared at her questionably. How do we know this isn't some kind of trick? Mikaru asked suspiciously. Irionko, he took a deep breath then asked, would you like to form a new clan? Mikaru and Ayaka were both caught off guard by this. Wait, what do you mean by form a new clan? They both asked, a little nervous yet with a little interested. I mean, I can give you a special bloodline ability that no one else can have except members of your new clan. She said more clearly. You will be given the ability to transform into a xenomorph yourselves and the ability to summon xenomorphs from the summoning realm into bat. TLE to assist you or to help you in any way. Even your lifespan will be increased. All you have to do is free me and sign the contract in blood, then I give you this gift, Irionko, he explained, causing Mikaru and Ayaka to look at one another. What do you say? She asked. Then, Mikaru and Ayaka looked at the floor, deep in thought and not sure how to answer. There was a thought of looking like them the rest of our lives. Oh, and don't worry, you will look like us only when you transform, not all the time, Irionko, he said, usurping them that it is not permanent look. Mikaru and Ayaka looked up and sighed in relief. You will just have the abilities, skills, and power that my race has acquired over the years from being bred from humans, she said with a smile on her face. They had the hopeful smile on their face. Mikaru turned to Ayaka to see if she would agree. She nodded and he nodded back and turned to Irionko. Okay, we'll do it, he said. She smiled. I admire your confidence. CE, but are you certain, because if anything goes wrong, you will die, she said to warn them. No way. We don't go back on my word, Mikaru said with determination in his eyes. Ayaka nodded. That's right. With that, Irionko, he nodded and smiled proudly. You guys sure got guts, she stated with a snicker. Oh, by the way, what are your names? She asked, curiously. Mikaru Uzumaki Uchiha, Mikaru replied. Ayaka Uzumaki Uchiha, Ayaka replied. At that instant, she nodded and said to them, okay. Mikaru-chan, Ayaka-chan approach. They nodded and did as they were told as she smirked at what they told her. So they're an Uchiha and Uzumaki offspring, hun. That's a very potent mix. Would you please remove these chains? She pleaded as she struggled against her binding with a whine. The war. Yours and Praetorians watched cautiously behind the two. Mikaru and Ayaka nodded and pulled out some wires from their emergence ninja hip pouch and tied the ends to some shuriken. After that, they EU the shuriken at the chains and binds, just missing the Irionko, and pulled back, tying them to the chains. They both went through the hand seals. Fire release. Dragon fire technique. The two of them breathes out fire that shot up the wires, melting the chains and binds. Irionko, he shakes off the melted chains, binds, and jumps down, landing with a loud thud. She then ran over to the two and pulled them into a bone-crushing hug. Oh, thank you Mikaru-chan, Ayaka-chan. She cried, squeezing them more. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Air. Need. Air. Mikaru choked out as he and Ayaka face turned blue and looked like all the pressure in their heads were going to cause them to burst. She then caught on to what she was doing and released them both, who gasped, then took large inhales of air. Oh, I'm so sorry. She apologized, being a hand to her mouth. It's okay, Mikaru said with a wheeze and a wave as he and Ayaka caught their breath. Afterwards, Irionko-he approached them, causing them to look up. Mikaru-chan, Ayaka-chan, this may hurt a bit, but don't worry. It will be all worth it at the end, Irionko-he said as she lifted Mikaru up to her face with her arm and put her second pair of hands on his head. Holding him in place and extended her inner jaw out and gently latched it onto his neck right over the brachiocephalic artery. Mikaru let out a frightened whimper as she lightly bit down on the flesh. He then cried out in agony from intense pain that he felt as Irionko-he's inner jaw began to ooze something in his bloodstream. It felt like all his nerves were on fire and his insides were melting and reforming. The pain was still unbearable, like his blood turned to magma, but the pressure on his neck began to lessen as the process was nearly over. At the end of the process, she closed the wound on his neck and released him as she then did the same thing to Ayaka. Then suddenly, Mikaru and Ayaka, who were on all four, threw their heads back and screamed as they felt an extreme, agonizing pain. They were then surrounded by a black chakra before they fell to the floor as they transforming into xenomorphs. Their faces changed as their eyes vanished into their skulls and their teeth elongated. A segmented tail sprouted from their tailbones and four long, dorsal tubes and dorsal spine erupted for their backs, which ripped holes into their shirts and shorts. Their body turned skeletal and biomechanical in appearance and their skin tone turned to a mute shade of blue. 2 spurs grew from the back of their feet and their hands became clawed with an extra finger. When the pain finally subsided, they stood up and took in each other's appearance. They then looked at our new bodies with astonishment, as they were small warriors with smooth carapaces. They both made several strikes at the wall with their hands and tails, and noticed their strength had increased dramatically, causing them to look down their hands in awe. Wow! This power, flowing through me, it feels great, they both said with astonishment. Then with a sharp jolt of pain, which caused them both to wince, Mikaru and Ayaka transformed back to our original human forms. Congratulations Mikaru-chan, Ayaka-chan. The process went great with no problems. Oh, and do not worry. You will not feel pain the next time you transform. It only will happen the first time, Irionko-he said with a warm smile. They then went over how to summon xenomorphs with the contract. They signed the contract in blood and summoned our first xenomorph summons, who happened to be 2 runners. Mikaru and Ayaka bowed to their summons. They then went over the types of xenomorphs and the xenomorph life cycle. After Irionko-he finished, Mikaru had something he wanted to ask her. So, all of your kin D started out as a parasitic facehugger that hatches out of an egg and implants an embryo into a living host that grows into a chestburster. It then bursts through the chest of the host and grows into an adult, right? Mikaru asked and received a nod from Irionko-he. Then why didn't you have an egg sac? I thought you said that captured queens had egg sacs to lay eggs to make warriors for the young yautjas to hunt. Didn't your mother have an egg sac? Mikaru asked with a confused look. Yes, she did, but that was before humans freed her 100 years ago and injected her with mDNA so she can give birth to live young and not rely on facehuggers, not worry about her eggs being destroyed after she laid them. Therefore, now we have a human reproductive system, in a way. We can spawn thousands of offspring, but no all at once. Us human spawn queens give birth to about 2 to 3 dozen chestbursters, while runner queens spawn 1 to 2 dozen Bambi bursters and Predallion Queens spawn 2 to 3 Predallion chestbursters, but we all have some Praetorian or queen chestbursters every now and then in the litter, Irionko-he explained to them. Mikaru and Ayaka stared in a and nodded understandably after she gave her explanation. Then Ayaka had another question. Hey Irionko-he, how come Mikaru and I has a smoother head instead of the ribbed one like the other warriors when he is in his xenomorph form? Irionko-he smiled at her educated question. Ah, so you noticed, hun? Well, the reason is that you and Mikaru-chan are immature warriors, aka hunters. Both Arriers and drones, aka scouts or workers, can have carapace. A carapace is a dorsal upper section of the exoskeleton or shell in a number of animal groups, including arthropods such as crustaceans and arachnids, as well as vertebrates such as turtles and tortoises. In turtles and tortoises, the underside is called the plastron. Young warriors can have a carapace when they molt from their chestburster stage. Unlike drones, a warrior's carapace will fall off as it matures, which is about a month or so after birth. Since Mikuru-chan is human, it will take longer for him to mature. I would say, he be mature at the age of 12 or 13. Moreover, Yu Ayaka-chan will be a young queen or a Praetorian by 15 or 16. There is a chance that Mikuru can become a Praetorian and queen, I doubt that it would change your gender. I would love to see someone try to copulate with Yu Ayaka-chan without permission, then for you would be a force to be reckoned with. You'd probably rip him or them to shreds. Irionkohi then started laughed at the last two sentences followed by Mikuru, causing Ayaka to blush deep red. With a look of shock and anger on her face. Damn right I would. I would not let someone like that violate me. I will only let the one I love do that with me when I'm older, and with my permission, that is, she yelled at her, and then turned her head away and poking her index fingers together with her cheeks blushed pink at the last sentence. Irionkohi saw this and smirked evilly at her. As that's so, that is some mature choice of words coming from someone as young as you are. I never took you to be that kind of girl, Ayaka-chan. Ayaka turned back to Irionkohi wide-eyed, her face beet red from embarrassment. They then turned their attention to Ikuru, who cleared his throat with a faint blush on his annoyed face. As fun as it would be to continue this conversation, we need to get home. Our parents will start getting worried about us. Ayaka gave her brother a thankful smile as Irionkohi nodded. Agreed. They, along with the rest of the hive, started to make their way through the labyrinth of the pyramid. At the entrance of the pyramid. They all arrived at the entrance of the pyramid and Irionkohi turned to the twins. Now if you need help with your training, just summon me when you need to, she said. Okay. Well, thank you for everything, Irionkohi, Mikuru said. Sincerely, and he and Ayaka bowed to her. You're welcome, Mikuru-chan. Well, I will see you sometime. Farewell, she said before she and her children ran out into the forest and disappeared from sight. At their house. By this time, Mikuru and Ayaka returned home. Masaki was there to greet them at the doorway. She had red plum hair, violet eyes, and fair skin. They wore a high-collared, sleeveless loose-fitting dress, with a blue-green apron over it, a gold band on her left wrist and standard sandals. Her hairstyle was like that of Hinata's but with her hair arranged in buns. Hi Kachan. They replied happily. Where were you two and what happened to your faces? We looked all over for two and worried us sick. She demanded, putting her hands on her hips. Ichiro then appeared beside her, gave them a demanding stare, and crossed his arms. He had black hair with a blue tint, onyx eyes, and fair skin. They wore a blue shirt with a red whirlpool spira L on the back and an Uchiha crest on the shoulders, brown cargo pants, and black sandals. He looked like a raven-haired Minato in appearance with the long pronounced hair troughs under his eyes. Mikuru and Ayaka looked down sadly. Because those kids who always bully us attacked us and chased us into a pyramid where they started beating on us, but we were saved by some new friends we made, Mikuru explained. They smiled happily. Their parents smiled, then tilted their heads to the side with a confused look. Oh, and who would that be? Ichiro asked curiously. Well, you won't believe us, so we'll show you, Ayaka said with a big smile. They then moved outside where Mikuru gathers some chakra, bit his thumb, which drew blood, and made a few hand seals. Summoning technique, he shouted as he slammed his hand onto the ground. There was an explosion of smoke that soon revealed a gigantic, black biomechanical creature. Their parents backed up a bit in fear and in surprise. The creature looked at Mikuru and Ayaka before turned to their parents. Ah, Mikuru-chan, Ayaka-chan, what is it? You need something? Irionkohi asked kindly. Mikuru nodded. Yes, I need you to help us explain everything to our parents. Kachan, Tochan, this is Irionkohi, our new friend and teacher, and Irionkohi, this is our mother, Masaki Uchiha, and our father, Ichiro Uchiha. Irionkohi looked at my parents with what looked like a friendly smile, then bowed respectfully. It's an honor to meet you, Uchiha-kun and Uchiha-chan. Ichiro nodded. Likewise. Now Mikuru said you have something to explain to us. Irionkohi nodded. Yes, that is correct. There is something you two need to know. Irionkohi then explained everything that has happened to them. When she finished, Masaki asked, wait, so they have new abilities? Irionkohi nodded. Yes, they do. But I'm afraid they can't live here anymore. Mikaru and Ayaka looked at her confused while their parents nodded, sadly. Yeah, we know. The pay. Opal in this land will not accept them with their Kekkei Genkai. The village will kill them along with us if they ever find out. We have no choice, Ichiro said with a sigh. Mikaru and Ayaka stared at him shocked. Irionko he nodded. Yes, I believe you should leave and go to a new village. Is there any village in particular? Their parents stared at each and nodded to one another. Ichiro turned to Irionko and said, I believe it is time we return to Konohagakure. Irionko smirked. I thought as much, since the Uchiha are one of the main clans of Konoha. Alright, head towards Konoha. Our parents nodded, then Irionko nodded back. Okay, until then, farewell, Irionko said and dispelled with a puff in smoke. A day later, they began to set things in order as their parents to leave for Konoha. They began packing up their stuff, so they sealed up their house before they leave. They are set to leave the next morning. That morning, Mikaru and Ayaka went over to their best friends and told them about them leaving. They asked if they could come too since they have no parents because they died during the last Shinobi World War, so they said it okay. After they finished with helping them pack their stuff, they headed home. They were a block away from their house when the Genin team jumped them again. So, you're alive. Too bad. Now we can give you 2 more punishment, the lead. Said before pushing Mikaru against the wall, then Ayaka. He and his teammates started beating on them again. Soon, Mikaru and Ayaka were lying on the ground in pain with bruises all over our bodies. Please, stop it, please. We're leaving today, Mikaru cried, looking at his sister who looked back at him. They started to beat on him again even more, which started to get him angrier and angrier by the second. So, nobody cares about you. Well, you are leaving, so this will be our going away present. But, it doesn't seem be enough, he said, bringing one of his hands up to his chin. Then, there was a flicker in his eyes and he stared at Ayaka evilly. I know, we will have a little fun, your sister, before you leave. That should be enough. Mikaru stared at him with eyes widened in horror, then looked at Ayaka. She was now scared out of her mind as they all grinned and nodded to each other before walking slowly towards her with a malevolence chuckle. She did not know what to do, so she sat there frozen in fear and started sniffling with tears running down her cheek. They continued laughed evilly as they approached until Mikaru got to his feet and stepped in front of them with his face was facing down, shadowed. Please, stop it, you had enough. Just leave, he pleaded with spread arms, protecting Ayaka, who now was looking to him like he was her knight in shining armor. Sorry, but we haven't had enough fun. Now step aside, the leader yelled. Mikaru did not budge as he stood there like a brick wall, which annoyed the group endlessly. Won't move, huh, fine, we'll make you move, he yelled as he and his friends charged and threw some punches at him. Streams started to form around from the ground around him, and when they were a foot away from him, he lifted his head up, showing the pure hatred in his eyes. I said, stop it. Mikaru screamed, filled with rage, pushing them back with an explosion of chakra. When they sat up, they saw that I was surrounded by black chakra that spiraled upwards. They also saw that he was no longer himself. Mikaru's hands that had claws and that his teeth were now silver and his incisors were longer. A bone-white segmented tail sprouted from his tailbone, and 4 fair-colored long, dorsal tubes and dorsal spine erupted for his back, ripping holes in his shirt and pants. His eyes were completely black with an eerie green slit and 3 tomos around it due to activating his Sharingan, which had 3 tomos in each eye. They stared in fear as he was flowing with chakra, and the leader. What is this? What the heck are you? They cried. He turned his attention to the academy students who just pissed their pants when he hissed angrily at them and yelled with an animalistic look. Now, it's time to return the favor, you bastards. He then charged at them. They all bolted to their feet and tried to run for it, but Mikaru leapt in front of them, cutting them off. He turned around and launched at them with a shriek. 5 minutes later, they were all on the ground, bloody and dead. Oh my god, what the hell have you done, you monsters? Someone cried from behind him. Then, he turned around to see a group of villagers. These guys attacked me and my sister and tried to rape her, so I gave them what they deserved, he explained, turning around. The villagers gasped at what they see. Hey, Those kids have a Keke Genkai. Kill them. One shouted. Mikaru shot his head up, stared back at them with fear, and started backing up. As they all came at him, Mikaru quickly grabbed the beaten Ayaka, put her on his back, and raced as fast as he could. Mikaru later turned around and saw that they had lost them, and then continued until they got to their house. Uchiha residence. When he got inside their house, he slammed the door shut. Put his sister down, who was now in a state of shock, and fell to the floor sniffing. There Misaki came down and saw Mikaru crying and asked, running down, "Mikaru, what's wrong?" When she saw them both completely, she gasped, "Mikaru, Ayaka, what happened to you?" Mikaru looked at his mother, then hugged her and cried with tears streaming down his cheeks. A group of villagers tried to attack us after the kids who bully us attacked us, who IIK kill. He said before he sobbed into his mother's shirt. What? She replied in shock and horror. Ichiro, get down here. Misaki yelled to her husband. Soon enough, Ichiro ran down and then saw Mikaru crying and Ayaka in a petrified daze. What happened? He asked with a hint of anger. A group of people tried to attack Mikaru and Ayaka. She explained just before the front door burst open. 15 villagers, and a Kirijonin came in, breaking Ayaka out of her daze and back to reality as she stared at the intruders in shock. What the hell do you want? Ichiro asked, activating his Sharingan. We came to exterminate you and your family, the Jonin responded, emotionlessly. There Misaki, Ayaka, and Mikaru gasped and stared in shock. But my Ichiro glare only intensified. Come again, he asked angrily. We are here to kill you, your wife, and your children because you all have a Keke Genkai and your children killed my Genin team. When I found out what happened to my team and that you and your family possessed a Keke Genkai, I believed you all should be executed. Immediately. You were all a threat to the entire nation. So, come quietly and your deaths will be swift. The Jonin said. Over my dead body. Misaki, grab Mikaru and Ayaka and get out of here now. I will hold them off as long as I can. He said, then led out a kunai and charged at them and killed 6 villagers. Misaki then pulled Mikaru and Ayaka back and they ran to the back door. They looked back when they heard someone yell in pain, and Mikaru and Ayaka saw their father fall to the floor with a pool of blood around him and several kunai in his back. Pain struck their heart as they watched their father die at the Jonin's knees. As Mikaru closed his eyes due to the loss of his father, with tears ran down his cheek. Tochin tilde. They cried as they tried to go back, but Misaki said, there's nothing we can do. Keep running. Next, we were on our way out the back door when 5 villagers cut us off. You will not harm my children. She screamed as she activated her chakra chains, which trapped them, pulled out a kunai, and charged at the villagers. She killed 3 of the villagers before the Kirijonin got behind her, knocked the kunai out of her hands, and put a sword to her neck. Mikaru, Ayaka ran while you still can. Get away from here. Go now, she screamed as before they cut her neck, killing her instantly. Kachan tilde. They screamed wide-eyed, tears running down their faces. Their hearts shattered to a million pieces at the sight of their mother's death and dropped to their knees. They now lost both parents, the 2 of the 4 people they cared about. When the rest of the mob showed up, they stared at us and moved towards them and said, now. It is your turn, kids. No tilde. A voice said behind the group. We can't let you kill them. After all, they are our best friends. Soon, their 2 best friends, Kenzo and Kurumi, ran thought the crowd, fighting their way towards them, then grabbed them and went out the back door. They then set them both down. Kenzo had spiky brown hair and hazel eyes, and Kurumi had cerulean blue eyes with raven hair. Their eyes widened in disbelief. You came to save us? Mikaru asked, started to whimper. They nodded and his eyes started watering up, so he just sobbed. Why? Ayaka asked, sobbing. Because you both are our friends and that's what friends do. We look out each other, Kenzo said as he and Kurumi changed the group with kunai in hand. Mikaru closed his eyes, then looked up with his Sharingan active. Ayaka did too, but this time with 3 tomos in them, and they joined them in the fighting. Suddenly one village got behind Mikaru and stabbed his back. He yelled in pain and fell. Ayaka tried to save him but rounded up being injured, too. They stared at the 2 villages that were about to kill them. They closed their eyes and turned away as they brought their swords down on them. When the pain never came, they opened their eyes, looked up, and saw Kenzo and Kurumi with blades through their hearts. They both stared in shock, tears running down their faces as they shook their heads in disbelief. Kenzo, Kurumi, they screamed as the villagers removed their blades and threw them to twins. Mikuru and Ayaka caught them and held them, sobbing. No, please, stay with me. Please, you can't die, too. Mikuru cried to Kurumi while Ayaka cried to Kenzo. I'm sorry Mikuru-kun, but I can't. Please, do not cry. We will always be with you. We know about your Kekkei Genkai and respect you for them. Promise us, Mikuru-kun. Please, use them. For good. We have faith in you, they said to them before the light faded from their eyes and died in their hands. Mikuru and Ayaka's eyes widened with tears streaming down their faces as they stared to them devastated before hugging them tightly weeping uncontrollably. The villager standing over us laughed. Got what they deserved. The little brats. Now, it's your turn, they said coldly then approached them. Mikuru and Ayaka jolted and their expresses darkened dangerously. What they have just said had snapped their last nerve. Shut up. Mikuru growled causing all the villagers and the Kirijonin froze from the killer intent Mikuru and Ayaka gave off as steam formed around them. First you. Why? Oh, you killed our parents. Now, you killed our friends. Our best friends. You will all pay for this, they growled simultaneously. At that instant, their bodies were surrounded by blue-black chakra. I'm going to kill you. They cried in an angry deep voice simultaneously as their features changed. They then turned to the villagers, let out a shriek before charging at them at lightning-fast speeds, and ripped them all to shreds. They then let out a yell of victory. They slowly turned and stared at the Kirijonin with their Mangekyo Sharingan activated. Both had 3 tomos formed into a 5-pointed star, think Itachi's but a straight version with 5 blades. Instead of 3, they then closed their left eyes, causing said eyes to bleed, then opened them, revealing veins around their sclera. They then called out the name to one of the techniques that you could use when you awaken the Mangekyo that their father told them 2 years ago after he told them about the Sharingan. Amaterasu, they said, which called forth night black flames that appeared on Kiri Shinobi and burned them alive. As soon as the screaming stopped, the pair focused their eyes on the black flames, extinguished them before crying out in pain, and clutched their left eye. When the pain stopped, they pulled their hands away and their eyes returned to normal. They then buried their mother and father's bodies and said their goodbyes to them. After that, they left the village with their stuff and left the house to burn to the ground. Sometime later, they ran into a girl named Yukime. She was a member of the Yuki clan who possessed the ice-release Kekkei Genkai, which allowed the users to combine wind and water-based chakra to create ice that they could manipulate through willpower alone. The members went into hiding after the civil war ended. Unfortunately, her parents were eventually discovered by some villagers and were killed. When she returned after playing in the forest, she found them dead and attacked by the villagers who have been waiting for her. In sorrow and anger, she unleashed her Kekkei Genkai that lay dormant inside her and killed them. After that, she had been wandering around, looking for someone to acknowledge her existence. She then met Mikuru and Ayaka and found out they also possessed a Kekkei Genkai. She liked Mikuru, and though he was cute, she quickly became friends with them and went with them to start a new life in the Konoha when she heard they treat those with Kekkei Genkai with love and respect. 3 weeks later, Mikuru and Ayaka were running for their lives through the forest with Kiri's hunter nin hot on their tails. As they looked back, the hunter nin launched kunai with explosive tags at them, which made them jump out of the way. Unfortunately, the Y ran into 2 hunter nin who then grabbed hold them. Mikuru and Ayaka started struggling relentlessly in hopes to get free. 3 more hunter nin appeared and walked over to them. The person in the middle was a man in his early 40s with tanned skin and copper-colored hair. He had a scar running diagonally across the middle of his face. The 2 beside him were women in the early 30s. The one on the left had fair skin and orange hair. The one on the right had cream-colored skin and light brown hair. The ones holding them were men in their late 20s. They both had fair skin, but the One holding the girl had blonde hair and the one holding the boy had light blue hair. There is no use struggling, kids. You've already been captured. The Hunter Nin squad leader laughed as the children struggled futilely to escape. Now, be smart and come with us quietly. Mizukage-sama wants to see him. He believes both your Kekkei Genkei may help strengthen our village. The two kids glared back. K at them with fully mature 3-tomo Sharingan. Never. They then sent their heels into the crotch of the Hunter Nin holding them, downing them to their knees before jumping back, and went through some hand seals. Fire release. Great fireball technique. After inhaling some air, they launched 2 massive fireballs at the group. All but the 2 downed leapt out of the way. The fireballs burned the 2 caught in it. They both collapsed to the ground, shaking slightly. The kids ducked as the Kiri Kunoichi appeared behind them and swung their swords at them. They spun around and hit them in the chest with a well-placed kunai strike. Both Hunter Nin then fell forward and hit the ground, knockout. The 2 kids sigh from exhaustion, but the boy stiffens when the presence of the squad leader appeared behind him. Little brats, he yelled as he kicked the girl in the chest. She screamed in pain as her back smacked into a tree and fell limp. Ayaka, the boy cried in panic before he had the wind knocked out of him by a punch to the gut. He coughed before collapsing to the ground. Grabbed by his collar, he was brought to the Hunter Nin's face. I'm going to give you one last chance. Come with us now or face death. What's it going to be? He asked with anger in his voice. The boy groaned and stared at him with a blank look. What's the point? He might just kill us anyway. Well, if that's how you fell, I just end your suffering now. The squad leader yells as he pulled out a kunai and prepares to stab him. As for your sister, I'll take her to the Mizukage after I'll have my fun with her. Then your new friend is next. What? The boy turned his head towards his fallen sister and froze in fear, as he was too exhausted due to the non-stop moving in jutsu usage to move. He stared back to the Hunter Nin and pleaded. No. Please spare her. Unexpectedly, an ice spear flew past him and hit the Hunter Nin squared on the forehead, through the headband he was wearing. The Hunter Nin had a shocked expression on his face behind his mask as he fell back dead. The boy drops to the ground and lands on his butt with a sigh of relief. He turned his head to his and his sister's new friend with a genuine smile. Thanks Yukime-chan, nice aim by the way. She giggled with a light blush and smiled back at him. You're welcome Mikaru-kun, and thanks. I had lots of practice. Yukime had shoulder-length black hair, pale skin, and dark brown eyes. She wore a short blue kimono with light blue edges, a dark gray split skirt, around her waist a brown sash with a fringed trail wrapped around his waist twice, and standard sandals. Her appearance was exactly like that of Haku's, but while he is male, she is female. He chuckled a bit at that and gets to his feet. He shakily makes his way over to his sister. He then falls to his knees and tries calling to her. Ayaka, are you okay? Hey, Ayaka, please say something. Ayaka. After a moment, she groans and slowly opens her eyes. Ma. Ikaru gasped and smiles with a look of relief. Ayaka, are you all right? She slowly sat up and replied. I think so. My back hurts a bit though. He helps her to her feet and rubs her back a bit. Okay, that should help. Let us get going. Ayaka, we need to get to harbor before more Hunter Nin show up. Right, she said with a nod. Mikaru snapped his fingers and several alien warriors crawled out of the trees and grabbed the unconscious bodies and the one dead body before dispelling into a cloud of smoke. A predallion then lands in front of them with a low growl. Mikaru Ayaka, Kassen sent me to inform you that we have found a place for our race in an unreachable valley in a faraway land. She awaits your arrival to speak to the Hokage about joining the village. Summon her when you are ready to speak to the Hokage. It said in a deep voice. Thank you and tell Irionkohi I will, Mikaru said and bows to the predallion, who bows in return before vanishing into a cloud of smoke. With the aliens gone, they set off towards the harbor. The trio walked down the trail to the harbor on the western side of water country, and their way out of this hellhole. Once there, they can sneak onto hip to fire country and find their way to Konoha, their father's birthplace. They arrive at the harbor at nightfall. As they walked through the streets, they spotted a clothing store and went inside. They walked around the store and saw 3 black cloaks that they liked that were in their size. They grabbed them along with 3 straw hats, went to counter, and paid for them with the little money they have from their house. Afterward, they put on their cloaks and hats and walk out. They then snuck aboard a ship just as it was about to leave for Fire Country. They both then hid in the cargo hold, and found a spot to get some sleep. They sat down against some boxes, took off their hats and cloaks, and put them inside their backpacks. Mikaru lets out a sigh. He then noticed Ayaka rested her head on his right shoulder and Yukime on his left, both fast asleep. Mikaru smiles at them, wraps an arm around Yukiko while affectionately, and gently strokes his twin sister's head. I wished things didn't turn out this way, Ayaka, Mikaru whispered to her before closed his eyes and falling asleep with a tear rolling down his cheek. 3 hours later, the sound of the boat's horn caused the trio to wake up and they looked out the round window. They have arrived at port in Fire Country, which caused them to smile excitedly. Well, it looks like we are here, Mikaru, Ayaka said as she turned to him. Indeed, we are, Ayaka, Mikaru replied with a nod. Well then, let's get going, Yukime said as she started walking upstairs to the deck. Once they snuck quietly onto the deck, Mikaru and Ayaka then transformed into their xenomorph forms and dove into the water. While they swam silently toward shore, Yukime ran across the water's surface, used chakra manipulation to walk over the water. They swam to shore, unnoticed, and walked on to the beach on all fours. They stood on the beach and shook all the water off them before transformed back to the original forms. Mikaru turned to Ayaka and Yukime. Come, Ayaka, Yukime-chan. Konoha awaits us. Yukime smiled cutely and nodded with happiness. Yes, Mikaru, Ayaka replied with a nod as they walked onto the path, put their straw hats on, and continued to their destination. Konoha. Unknown to them, 4 cloaked figures who wore straw hats and black cloaks watched the 3 pair with Sharingan eyes. Is that them? The tall one with a wrapped sword on his back asked. Yes, it is our Ototo and Imoto, and it appears they have a friend with them, one of the shorter ones answered while the other said. Maybe we can convince them to join our organization. Perhaps. However, they might not agree with our organization's goals. They're still young and innocent in this shinobi world, the median height one explained. Wow man, I knew you still had a soft spot in that cold little heart of yours, one of the shorter ones laughed, but the median one glared at him, which silenced the laugh. Oh hey man, can't take a joke. The one laughed nervously before the other bopped him over the head. This caused the tall one to chuckle a bit before turning back to the vanishing trio. Well, looks like they saved us the trouble of finding them, hun. The tall one of the figures asked to the other. Indeed, the median one replied. Then this should be easy, the tall one said. Let's go, the median one said before they vanished into nothing. It was a peaceful morning and Mikaru, Yukime, and Ayaka continue on to Konoha that is a few miles away now. Last night, they stopped at an inn to rest and were able to wash themselves and change into new clothes. Mikaru and Ayaka now wore gray shirts with a red whirlpool spiral on the back under their cloaks, brown cargo pants, and black sandals. Yukime changed into a sky blue short kimono with tan edges, a green-blue obi around her waist, a blue split skirt that reached down to her lower thigh, and standard sandals. Yukime was currently curious about how Konoha and Fire Country were like compared to Kiri and Water Country. Life outside of Water Country was still unknown to her. She turned to Mikaru hoping he could provide her with answers to her questions. Hey Mikaru-kun, what kind of place is Konoha? Yukime asked out of curiosity. Mikaru placed his index finger and his thumb on his chin, and gazed at the sky. Well, from what our Tochin told us, it is one of the best hidden villages. Although it and Fire Country have been relatively peaceful since the end of the Third Shinobi World War, it remains one of the most powerful villages in existence. As one of the 5 great shinobi countries, Konoha has a cage called the Hokage. There have been 4 of them so far, the most recent being the 4th Hokage. Within it, there are very powerful and well-respected clans. Of these, 4 are regarded as noble clans. These are the Aburame, Akamichi, Hyuga, and Uchiha clans. Mikaru turned to her and said with a small smile, so, in a way, it's probably the best one you could join. Yukime gazed down to the ground and said with a look of uncertainty, "I hope you're right, Mikuru-kun." Mikuru saw this and placed an arm on her shoulder, which caused her to blush slightly. Look to him. He looked at her with a calm and comforting face. He knows how she feels and he feels the same. She fears that they will reject her or fear her cause of her powers she possesses. He then smiled and said with confidence, "Don't worry, Yukime. You are precious to Ayaka and me. We will not let anyone do anything to you. Besides, were one of your friends right?" Yukime was taken back as she looked at Mikuru now with a completely new light. He sincerely cared for her well-being and as a friend. She never had anyone like that besides her dead parents. She now believed she could count on them when things turned for the worst. That he was a true friend. Look at it this way. If they reject us, we will leave and go found a better village than Konoha. Surely we can find a village that would accept us, right? Yukime smiled with a light blush and nodded full-heartedly with her eyes closed, right? Mikuru smiled a huge grin before he flinched as felt something wrong. He felt some kind of evil presence with two others filled with hatred. They are all directly behind them. He quickly came to a sudden stop, which confused both Ayaka and Mikuru. Mikuru then quickly turned around and decided to call them out. "All right, that's enough. Come on out now. I know you are there, so there is no point in hiding." Suddenly, 4 people appeared in front of them wearing straw hats and black cloaks with red clouds painted on them. Ayaka and Yukime gasped in surprise and looked to Mikuru. How did he know they were there? Was on their mind. "We have somewhere we need to go, so what do you want?" Mikuru asked. "It's been a long time, Mikuru," Ayaka, the second tallest one, said. "How do you know our names? Who are you?" Mikuru asked as he and Ayaka lifted their eyes up, revealing Sharingan eyes. The people in front of them grabbed their hats and lifted them up to reveal surprisingly more Sharingan eyes in 3 of them. Mikuru and Ayaka were shocked at first, but then narrowed their eyes with anger and sadness. They all took of their hats and stared at each other. They both have crimson hair, fully mature Sharingan, and fair skin. They wore a navy blue shirt under a black cloak with red clouds on it, camouflage gray-blue cargo pants, and brown sandals. Masaru's hairstyle was like that of Obito and has the long pronounced tear troughs under his eyes, while Ryumaru looked like a red-haired Izuna in appearance. "Masaru and Ryumaru Uchiha," Mikuru stated with disgust while Ayaka looked on with shock and sadness, muttering softly, "Masaru Nichan, Ryumaru Nichan." "Mikuru-kun, Ayaka-chan, you know these two?" Yukime asked in surprise, looking at the two. "Sadly yes, Yukime-chan. There are older brothers," Mikuru sighed before explaining it to Yukime as he glared at them. "They left our family 2 years ago and were never heard from again. We used to look up to them as idols up until they vanished." Mikuru then moved his focus to the other Uchiha and the man who looked like a shark. The Uchiha had a fully mature Sharingan, dull black hair that hung near his cheeks to frame his face and kept the rest of it in a ponytail, which was obscured by the high collar of his cloak he wore. And his skin was fair. The unique characteristic was the long pronounced tear troughs under his eyes. Like Masaru and Ryumaru, he wore a black cloak with red clouds on it, which was kept with the center of it buttoned down, as well as a slashed Konoha forehead protector. The shark man was a very tall, muscular shinobi. He had a distinctive shark-like appearance, complete with pale blue skin, small, round white eyes, gill-like facial markings under his eyes, gills on his shoulders, and sharp triangular teeth. He also styled his dull blue hair in the form of a shark fin. Like the others, he wore a black cloak with red clouds on it as well as a slashed kiri forehead protector. "Who are you?" Mikuru asked with caution as looked from one to the other. The shark man chuckled a bit. "Well then, I suppose I'll go first. The name's Kisame Hoshigaki," the blue shark man said with a toothy grin. "My name is Itachi Uchiha," said the Uchiha with an intense neutral gaze. Mikuru's eyes widened at him being an Uchiha for a moment before regaining his composure. He nodded to them and turned back towards the brothers. "So, do you mind explaining to us what you backstabbing deserters want with us?" Mikuru asked with annoyance. Masaru chuckled at that. "Oh, come now. Is that any way to say hello to your older brothers? We stopped calling you Nichan after you left us for your own personal gains. Anyway, what are you doing here with 2 missing nins?" Mikaru asked coldly. We were sent here to ask you two if you would like to join our organization, Ryumaru explained with a pleasant smile. Organization? Ayaka and Yukime asked in confusion. What organization? Mikaru asked out of curiously while watching them carefully. The death of their parents and closest friends taught him to be careful of whom they can trust. Masaru chuckled evilly before speaking. It's called Akatsuki. It is a group of missing nin. Kisame here was sought out for plotting overthrow water country's government and being involved in numerous assassinations, including that of a daimyo. Itachi here wiped out the Uchiha clan of Konoha Shin-Glei and Ed Lee. They gasped in ear with frightened eyes and looked at the man who said he was Itachi. This man here completely wiped out Uchiha clan. How could that have happened? This was too much for them to take in. What? A group composed of missing nin. And you want us to join you? Mikaru asked his older siblings, already knowing the answer. The two nodded with a crooked smile. Mikaru and Ayaka backed up a bit, nervously. Mikaru then turned to Itachi and asked, Why? Why did you do it, Itachi? Itachi stared at him with his intense gaze and said with a straight face, to test the limits of my power. Mikaru, Ayaka, and Yukiko looked at him in disbelief. That was all he had to say. Just for that reason he murdered a noble and powerful clan that was feared and respected through to test your power. That is why, for that reason alone. Mikaru asked as rage was building inside of him. Itachi closed his eyes and said neutrally, it was necessary. Mikaru glared at him and growled at him for that response. However, he could not outright charge in and attack him. To be able to wipe out the Uchiha and being one, he must be very strong and skilled shinobi. He turned back to, well then, the answer is no. You have both gone insane with power and arrogance. Besides that, you joined up with the likes of them. We will never join a group with the likes of you. Go away. Mikaru yelled dangerously. Deep inside, Itachi was smirking. He was starting to like them more and more now. They both remind him of his true brother-like friend, Shisui Uchiha. Ototo, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Masaru stated as 5 other ninja appeared beside them. They all wore blue camouflaged outfits and wore kiri forehead protectors. Mikaru then decided to make a break for it and grabbed Ayaka's hand. Quickly Ayaka, Yukime-chan. We have to get out of here before. He never had time to finish as Masaru reappeared in front of him. Wrong answer. He yelled with a furious look before punching Mikaru in the gut, sending him flying towards a tree. Mikaru hit the tree with a cracking sound, which caused him to cry out in pain before sliding to the ground. Mikaru-kun, Ayaka and Yukime screamed before turning to Masaru. You bastard! Ayaka yelled as she charged at Masaru, her right hand balled into a fist, but she was kicked in the stomach by Ryumaru. She coughed up some blue before being sent spinning sideways towards Mikaru and skidding on her back and stopped right next to him. Before Yukime could retaliate, Kisame knocked her to the ground and placed a foot on her back, preventing her from getting up. Itachi just stood there and watched everything unfold. Mikaru tried to get up but failed miserably and groaned. Ayaka, are you okay? He asked. Yeah, she lied as she groaned and sat up head down, wiping the blood off her mouth. They lifted their heads up and looked back at their brothers. So, you both have awaked your Sharingan too, hun. But, I wonder if you have achieved the next state. Masaru said as he and Ryumaru closed their eyes, causing Mikaru and Ayaka to watch with caution. As they slowly started to open them, Mikaru and Ayaka's eyes widened in fear as they realized what they were about to do. Mangekyo Sharingan. They yelled with widened eyes as their Sharingan changed. Masaru's Sharingan changed as the 3 tomos turned and formed into a sun, a medium circle with 8 points and pupil inside it in a red design with a black background, while Ryumaru's was an 8-pointed pinwheel, think Shisui's, but with 8 points. Ikaru and Ayaka stared at them and gasped in horror as they were pulled into the Tsukuyomi mindscape. Mikaru soon found himself in a black void with no end in sight and reflections of himself all around him. He both looked around frantically trying to figure out where they were. This place is, he thought as they looked around. Suddenly, he felt he was not on anything anymore. He started falling, repeatedly with look of shock in his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the whole world changed as everything appeared in a grayscale inverted colors except the moon, which was red, in turn, casted a red light throughout the illusion, giving the background a blood-red appearance. He found himself in a house that seemed to feel familiar. It took a moment for him to relieve it was their childhood home in that village they lived at in Water Country. When he realized this, they both gasped. This place could it be? He then looked at his hands and his cloths. He noticed his hands were dirty, and his clothes had holes and tears with dirt and some blood on it. He then started whimpering in fear. He stopped when he heard a familiar voice. That's right, Masaru's voice answered. This is our house. He looked up and saw his father, Ichiro, at the front door, and turned around to see his mother, Masaki, outside the back door. Tochan, Kachan. He then gasped as he saw the Kirijonin rest ling his father and holding his mother in a harness hold. He stared at them in shock and horror as Masaru appeared behind him with devilish smile. Masaru closed his eyes and said, "You are weak." For the next 24 hours, the Kiri shinobi pulled his sword back ready to strike their parents. Mikaru could do nothing but stand there helplessly. "Stop it," he pleaded as he started trembling. Masaru opened their eyes and said with devilish smile, "Relive that day." The sword then slowly moved towards their parents to slash them. Mikaru's eyes widened in horror before he closed his eyes and held his head screamed, "Stop it." The sword struck their father through the chest and their mother across the neck, splattering blood all over the floor and ground. In Ryumaru's Tsukuyomi, Ayaka experienced the same thing and did not handle it any better than her twin brother did. Unfortunately, it was much worse for her to handle. Back in the real world, Mikaru and Ayaka let out a high-pitched scream of horror. Yukime stared at the pair as screamed with tears running down her cheeks. Whatever they were doing to them, it was hurting her inside to hear them scream in such agony. It also angered her that she could do anything to help them with Kisame holding her down. So, all she could do was cry and watch them being tormented. "Stop this, please, stop this now," she cried out for the whole world to hear. Mindscape. Mikaru opened his eyes with a gasp. His eyes trembled at the traumatizing scene before him that was all too familiar to him. Lying on the ground and the floor was the bodies of his mother and father, in a pool of their own blood. Standing over them was the Jonin. A smirk soon appeared on the Kiri Jonin's face. Tears ran down Mikaru's face as he silently sobbed. How, do you know what happened to Kachan and Tochan?" Mikaru asked in despair as he clutched his eyes shut. Masaru appeared before him and answered, "Because, we were there." Mikaru gasped in shock and his eyes started trembling. They were there at the time it happened. They watched as their parents and friends were slaughtered. "What, then? Why didn't you help us?" he pleaded as tears flowed for his eyes again. "Masaru, why didn't you and Ryumaru try to save Kachan and Tochan? They were your parents too." Masaru snorted. "What use were they to us?" Mikaru's head twitched at that response. Deep inside, his heart ached as a small flame filled with anger and pain was lit. "They were just holding us back. We want to have some purpose in life and be useful. However, they wanted us to live a peaceful life, without fear of death, destruction, and war," Masaru stated with anger and laugh. "Humph. Got what they fucking deserve." Mikaru's upper face was shadowed over as the flame inside him grew and burned with hatred and rage. Masaru then appeared behind him as another scene took place. It was the backyard of their house. Two villagers appeared holding Kenzo and Kurumi with swords in their hands ready to strike. "Masaru, stop this," Mikaru said with building anger in his voice. Unknown to Masaru, his nails morphed into white-tipped pink claws and he was faintly coated in blue-black chakra. Masaru smirked with arrogance and replied, "Make me." That was a big mistake on his part as the swords then pierced Kenzo and Kurumi's chest. Mikaru started shaking and grunting with rage. His blue-black aura flared and streamed around him. Masaru stared in awe at what was happening. What the? He gasped in shock, as the world around them was disorienting. The pain he felt was unlike any pain he felt before. It was agonizing and enraging. He groaned, clutching his hands into fists, but could not scream, as it was too much for him to handle, tears running from their eyes. Something inside him burst open and he were overwhelmed by blue-black chakra, which cloaked around him in a blaze. After which he slowly moved his head down and glared at older brothers. His Sharingan swirled into the Mangekyo Sharingan. Mikaru slowly lowered his head towards his chest, grunting in agony. Then after a moment, he threw his head back and let out a horrifying, unworldly high-pitched shriek of rage. In Ryumaru's Tsukuyomi, Ayaka experienced something similar and like before did not handle it any better. Back in the real world, Mikaru and Ayaka broke free of the Tsukuyomi with a rage-filled, high-pitched inhuman shriek. Their brother cried out in pain and stumbled back a bit, holding their heads. Yukime stared at the pair in shock along with Kisame and Itachi as haunting shriek slowly ended. Mikaru and Ayaka, who were surrounded by a blue-black aura, had a darker shade to their skin. Their eyes had their Mangekyo Sharingan in it, but the whites of their eyes were black. On their back, they had 4 fleshy tubes and a spike that burst through their shirts. Their hands and feet were clawed, and at their end, a fleshy tail with vertebrate sticking of it with a dangerous paw. RB at the end had burst through their pants. They let out a hiss before quickly going through the hand seals, snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse, and tiger while their older brother's guard was down. Fire release. Great fireball technique. They then launched a massive fireball, each the size of a house, at them. When the smoke cleared, they walked up to the charcoaled bodies and smirk. The bodies then exploded into smoke, revealing charcoaled logs with tags on them. The tags suddenly had flames erupt on them and a hissing sound can be heard. Shit, they cried as Kisame and Itachi cleared the area before the explosive tags lit up. In Konoha, a few Chunin were on guard duty at the east gate and were in deep conversation. The one on the left had white blonde hair and blue eyes. The one on the right had long brown hair and pale eyes. Suddenly, an inhuman shriek echoed across the area, followed moments later by a bright flash and an explosion out in the middle of the forest. They both snapped their head towards the rising cloud of black and gray smoke, and the Chunin with white blonde hair yelled in surprise, "Hey Daisuke, what in the world was that?" The brown-haired shinobi shook his head, "I don't know. But I'm going to investigate. Go and notify Hokage-sama right away." The Chunin with white blonde hair nodded, "Right." With that, they both jumped into action. Well, so much for another boring day of guard duty, the man known as Daisuke thought as he raced down the wall then towards the smoke. In the forest, meanwhile, Mikaru, Yukime, and Ayaka were running. Though the forest and Mikaru was in intense pain. The cloaks they were wearing have burned in the blast, and their gray shirts with a red whirlpool spiral on the back, brown cargo pants were now ragged and dirty. Their black sandals were also torn and worn from the blast and were lost in their escape. The only one whose clothes were decent was Yukime, for she only lost her cloak. However, her cloths were slowly soaking up with blood from Mikaru's wounds and were dissolving from the blood's acidity. Mikaru's body had been taken serious damage and was in bad shape, as he currently had his arm over Yukime's shoulder for support. All over his body were cuts and burns, but his left arm was bleeding badly from the large wound on it from the blast debris. As he was carried by Yukime, his blood was dripping onto the ground. Once it touched the ground, it steamed and hissed as it started to dissolve the soil. Ayaka's injuries were only minor, small cuts and burns due to Mikaru shielding her from most of the blast. Yukiko, however, was a little bruised and had several burns, including the ones caused by Mikaru's acidic blood. They all looked back to see if their traitorous brothers that them were following us when they bumped into something and fell backwards. They looked up and saw Masaru and Ryumaru standing in front of them, while the 2 other Akatsuki members were standing in the trees with their hats on. Masaru and Ryumaru removed their blades from the stealth and stabbed them with a growl of anger. Mikaru and Ayaka screamed out in pain before Masaru and Ryumaru threw them with their swords into the trunk of a tree. Yukime tried to fight them off with her ice release techniques, but was countered and overpowered by their fire release techniques. The Chunin named Daisuke that went to investigate what caused the explosion was on his way to the site when he heard high-pitched screams of pain. He looked over his right and saw a boy and 2 girls wearing ragged cloth, surrounded by 2 men on the ground and 2 men in the trees. They overwhelmed the girl, which to his surprise, can use ice release, and backhand her hard before punching her into a tree next to the other 2. They soon picked the said 2 up off the ground, threw them out in the open, and now towered over them. Daisuke stopped and went to check out what is going on. He soon found a nearby tree to hide in it. Then, he started to eavesdrop on them. He now noticed that two of them have long and messy raven hair with red eyes and the other black hair with dark brown eyes that were currently closed. Upon looking closer at the slightly identical children's eyes, and he soon realized that they both Uchiha from the Sharingan they had in their eyes. He also notices that the boy and the girl were severely injured with the stab wounds they now have. It seems that you both have broken free of the Tsukuyomi. But how? How did you do it? Masaru asked as he and Ryumaru deactivating their Mangekyo Sharingan. Mikuru and Ayaka panted for a bit and chuckled evilly. It's because we too have unlocked the Mangekyo Sharingan. They then lifted their heads up and glared at their older brothers with their own Mangekyo Sharingan. Their Mangekyo had 3 tomos formed into a ring, think Madara's butt, without the holes and more. Like the tomos in the Sharingan in shape. As soon as it activated, it deactivated. Ryumaru then grabbed Mikuru by the scruff of his shirt and lifted him up to his face yelling, "Don't give me that. We talking about what was with that shriek you and Ayaka made and that black chakra." Mikuru and Ayaka's eyes widened in surprise while Yukime, who just reawakened, looked at them with curiosity, as well as Itachi and Kisame. Then, Yukime suddenly remembered seeing those creatures that Mikuru and Ayaka could summon and noticed that they looked somewhat like them in their transformations. Now that you mention it, you two looked almost like those creatures you were able to summon. How is that so, Mikuru-kun, Ayaka-chan? Yukime asked out of pure curiosity. This caught everyone's attention. Mikuru and Ayaka now realized that they did not tell her about them. ND were regretting it since she mentioned it in front their brothers and the others. Creatures. Ryumaru asked in surprise and suspension before turning back to Mikuru. What is she talking about, Mikuru? Mikuru sighed and stared sadly down at the ground before he said, she means the creatures that Ayaka and I signed a summoning contract with before the day our parents and friends died. They gave us a special privilege to have a new bloodline to start a new clan. I see, Masaru said with interest while everyone else was stupefied by this information. Anyways, are you two joining us or not? Come on, stop running, kids. Kisame said, there is nowhere to run to anymore, nowhere to escape, so just come with us, you brats. Their eyes narrowed in fear as panic started to settle in. Ours started to leak out of their bloody eyes as they both began to whimper. So, what's it going to be, kids? Kisame asked. We've already told you, we will never join the likes of Akatsuki. What does you want us anyways beside the fact that we have the Sharingan? Mikuru yelled, causing Daisuke to wonder who or what Akatsuki is, for he has never heard of it. Because you two possess unimaginable power. You are too dangerous to be kept alive. No one else will ever accept you, so just join Akatsuki and your lives will be spared, Masaru said. Never in a million years. Mikuru growled venomously. Ryumaru smirked at that and chuckled evilly before saying, persistent, aren't we? Do you even know why villagers tried to kill you? Masaru asked, the one being more serious now. Mikuru and Ayaka stared at their brother, surprised and shocked. They then lowered their heads, eyes glazed over by sadness. Yeah, we do. It is because of the Kekkei Genkai we process. The villagers of Water Town fear that clans possessing Kekkei Genkai will just being more war and misfortune. Therefore, after they found out that we process the Dojutsu Kekkei Genkai, the Sharingan, they tried to kill us. In addition, our parents were killed too because they possess a Kekkei Genkai. Kachan and Tochan tried to protect us from the villagers, but they were killed in the process. Even our best friends that we grew up with gave their lives for us, even though members of our clans killed their parents during the last Shinobi World War, making them orphans, but they did not hold that against us. Still, it was not our fault. In blind rage, we killed them all. Then after that, we fled the village because we were unwanted and hated there, Mikuru said with sadness in his voice, tears running down his faces. Ayaka nodded sadly after he finished. Sadness filled her eyes too as she cried silently. Yukime just stared with a look of sadness and pity for the twins with tears running down her cheeks. Saying had Daisuke was shocked and saddened from what he heard, was an understatement as he had tears in his eyes with a hardened gaze. Ryumaru nodded with a smirk and said, yes Mikuru, that's right. And that Madara-sama was interested in you two when he found out the part that you two process one of the three strongest Kekkei Genkei, even though we process them too. However, you two have mastered THM at such a young age and now have a new bloodline that we do not even possess. Therefore, he sent us to find you two to ask you to join us. After spending 3 weeks tracking you, we finally found you two all alone and ripe for the pickings. They approached slowly towards Mikaru and Ayaka, backing them up against the tree as they did. Yukime's eyes widened in fear as she watched in horror as Masaru and Ryumaru stopped and towering over both of them. Mikaru was now whimpering in fear. He did not have any chakra left and neither does Ayaka because they used up some of what was left of their chakra in the fight earlier. Even Yukime was out of chakra from using her ice release to try to protect them, which ultimately failed. Mikaru looked over to his sister who was having it worse than him. No one wants to watch themselves, their twin brother or sister, or best friend being killed right in front of them. You two nearly killed us back there with the fire release. Great fireball technique you surprised us with. Masaru said with a hint of anger in his voice as his right eye twitched from the memory. This surprised Daisuke who was hiding in the trees. Amazing. These children can perform fire-style techniques at such a young age. They are just like a new generation of Itachi, except they have both Uchiha blood running through their veins. In addition, the fact that the older SIBL Ings have red hair means the twins are also Uzumaki by blood. Ryumaru chuckled before saying, but it seems you both have gotten careless when failed to detect the paper bombs attached to the logs. Ryumaru and Masaru then laughed crazily and evilly. Daisuke's eyes widened with realization. Now I see, that was what caused that explosion we saw, he thought, as he now understood what happened here. This is the end for you Ototo, Imoto. This is where you die, farewell, Masaru said before he and Ryumaru took out their swords and raised them over their shoulders preparing to strike. It's too bad we have to kill you. With your mastery of the Sharingan, you two could have been an outstanding shinobi, Masaru said with an evil grin, but still, we can still hopefully obtain the eternal Manjiki. O Sharingan by killing you and taking your eyes which will grant us unimaginable power. After I kill you Mikaru, Ryumaru will kill Ayaka and he will also obtain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan as well. Then, everything happened in slow motion as they brought their swords down. Mikaru and Ayaka just looked on with hopelessness with widened eyes. Yukime closed her eyes shut with tears running down her cheeks, as she could not bear to see the sight of them be killed in front of her. At this time, Daisuke reappeared in front of the two just as the swords were started moving down on the twins. Immediately, he took out two kunai and used them to stop the attacks before they could kill the children. The sound of metal hitting metal snapped Mikaru and Ayaka out of their daze and stared at the person standing with two kunai pushing the swords backs. They then stared wide-eyed in shock as this man saved their life and he does not even know them. Yukime was speechless by the man saving her only friends for their brothers. Killing defenseless children is not the way of the shinobi. Daisuke growled at Masaru and Ryumaru with hatred for even thinking about it. He turned his head and said with a grin, "You all right kids?" Mikaru blinked a few times before nodding, nervously as did Ayaka. "What are your names?" "My name's Daisuke," he asked the pair. At first, Mikaru just lowered his head a little and said nervously. Mikaru you, Uchiha. Ayaka you, Uchiha, Ayaka replied as nervously as her brother. The Chunin then eyed Yukime and asked, "And the girl, what's her name?" "She's our friend, Yukime," Mikaru replied. Daisuke immediately nodded and said, "Don't worry Mikaru-kun. I will not let them hurt you, your sister, or your friend anymore. I will protect you with my life, all of you." Mikaru and Ayaka looked up again with a stunned look. Now, why would a Konoha shinobi risk his life for these two? They're nothing but bloodthirsty monsters. Ryumaru taunted at Daisuke, hoping he would change his mind and walk away. Yukiko was stunned by this development. To think that Mikaru and Ayaka were saved by a Konoha shinobi who saved them without hesitation. Mikaru and Ayaka, however, looked down at the ground in disgrace, as they are nothing more than a burden in this situation. "No, you're wrong. They are not monsters," the Konoha shinobi said with confidence. "This cow," said both the twins looked up with surprised look. You're far from it. They are nothing of the sort. They're spirited, young children who need love, support, and guidance which they can get from Konohagakure no Sato. He stated with a smile. Mikaru's eyes started watering, and so were Ayaka's and Yukime's as well. This Konoha shinobi is laying down his life to protect us. For the first time in my life, someone besides my parent cares about us, Mikaru thought with hope and belief. A warm, happy smile and watering eyes appeared on all of Orphan's faces. However, it did not last long. Through TCK, pathetic. You are totally pathetic, Masaru yelled after going through a series of hand seals quickly. Their eyes widened in surprise as they recognized the ninjutsu he was about to use. Look out, they cried to warn Daisuke. Farewell you fool, water release. Water dragon bullet technique. The Chunin was caught off guard by the water dragon that materialized out of the nearby lake in T. His surrounding area hit him from his right, sending him into a tree. The children gasped as he hit the tree hard before looked at the brothers with anger and hatred. So, you wish to protect the children. Fine then, I will kill you first. You all can go to the afterlife together, Ryumaru said, raising his sword. Suddenly, Mikaru and Ayaka reactivated their Sharingan, rushed over to him at lightning-fast speed, and punched Ryumaru in the face before Mikaru took the sword from him and stabbed him through the heart only for him to poof into a log. This surprised the older brothers. That they all people would protect a Konoha shinobi that they do not even know. The twins stared at their older brothers with our Mangekyo Sharingan in full-blown rage as molten green gigantic, skeletal humanoid beings of energy with glowing yellow eyes surrounds to pair. You people know what this technique is, right? Boy, are these fools in for it now. We trusted you. We looked up to you. We thought you were the best brothers we could ever have. Masaru, Ryumaru, why did you betray Kachan and Tochin and join Akatsuki? Kachan and Tochin had spoken so highly of you. Why did you do it? They demanded as one. Yukime was awestruck and speechless about what was happening to her newfound friends with some fear attached. Because Madara-sama offered us power that we couldn't refuse if we left our village and our family behind. Sorry we hurt you, but we did what we had to so we would be of some use. We were able to use our Sharingan and the Uzumaki bloodline without fear. Now since you will not join us, we will have to kill you now. Therefore, I am sad to say it is goodbye my foolish Ototo and Imoto. I wish it didn't have to come to this, Masaru said before he and Ryumaru held his sword behind them and rushed towards Mikaru and Ayaka, who were starting to be engulfing by pure hatred as the beings started growing muscles and battle amour around them. At that instant, a barrage of kunai and shuriken flew at Masaru and Ryumaru, who stopped and blocked them with their swords and looked up to see three Konoha Anbu that had come to assist Daisuke with the situation. The one on the left was a woman with violet hair. The one on the right was a man with brown hair, and the squad leader was a man with spiky silver hair who, unlike the only two, was not wearing an Anbu animal mask, but a BLUE cloth mask that covered everything below his eyes. I wouldn't if I were you. Now, leave or we will kill you. You have no right to kill defenseless children, the silver-haired Anbu said sternly as he glared at them. You look familiar. What's your name? Masaru said as he, Ryumaru, and their comrades turned around and stared at the gray-haired Anbu who in his left eye had the Sharingan. My name is Kakashi Hatake. Kakashi said before continuing, now, I will say it again. Leave now or we'll kill you. Oh yeah, now I remember. Kakashi Hatake, also known as the copy ninja Kakashi and Kakashi of the Sharingan. Fine Kakashi, so come down here, and make us. I want to see if you are as good as people say you are, Masaru said as he and Ryumaru got into fight stances. His comrades stayed where they were. They do not enjoy the fact that they drew too much attention and were thinking about leaving. When they saw what was happening to the twins, the Anbu were ready to attack, but they stopped. And gasped when they saw what was happening to Mikaru and Ayaka. Kakashi said as he smirked, well, it would seem that it is out of our hands now. Masaru and Ryumaru gave them a confused look. A moment before they sensed a chakra spike and killing intent, as well as hearing Yukime gasp in shock and fear. They turned to see both Mikaru and Ayaka surrounded by a black chakra with dorsal tubes, spikes, and tails as the red gigantic armored humanoid beings turned black as well with their armor changing shape. They all stared in complete shock as the wound on Mikaru's shoulder along with his and Ayaka's stab wounds vanished before their eyes. They both slowly lifted the heads up revealing black and red eyes, with an eerie green in their Mangekyo Sharingan patterns. However, their eyes were blooding from using the Susanoo and their vision was fading a little. Masaru, Ryumaru, we have all we can stand of you two. First, you tried to kill my sister, our last friend, and me. Then you tried to kill our rescuer and protector. So now, we're going to kill you. Mikaru said in a low voice with a malevolent smirk before he and Ayaka lowered their heads and being overshadowed by the dense chakra of their Susanoos. When he saw that their silhouettes began to change shape and form again, Masaru shouted to his sibling. Hurry Ryumaru, we must stop them before they transform. This caught the attention of the Anbu as they stared in awe and shock at what was going on. Kakashi knew that the beings surrounding the two were the Mangekyo Sharingan's final ability, Susanoo. However, they were also changing along with pairs. As soon they were inches away from them, Masaru and Ryumaru were sent flying backward by their Susanoo's hands. Then as quickly as it started, Mikaru and Ayaka's transformation into xenomorph mode was completed. The Susanoo's armor now took on a more xenomorphic appearance as it was more skeletal and the headdress more like the skull of a xenomorph queen with two glowing eyes inside its maw. Suddenly they were unable to continue using Susanoo as it slowly vanished before everyone's eyes, making them visible again. By the time Masaru and Ryumaru got up again and looked at the twins, they were still human size and looked human, but at the same time, they did not. They had an elongated, cylindrical skull with a smooth carapace but possessed no visible eyes and had segmented and blade-tipped tails. The tails have a flat ridge of spines at the base of the blade. The sharp tip was a large, spear-like barb. They had a skeletal, biomechanical appearance and colored in a muted shade of black. Their bodies have 4 long, dorsal tubes on their backs and a spike with flat ridge of spines on top with smaller ones on the bottom at the base of the neck. They had 4-fingered hands, with 2 long middle fingers and a pair of thumbs and 4-toed feet, which were human-like with 2 toe-like appendages at the keel of each foot and the legs being in a plantigrade posture. As they slowly lifted their heads up looked at them, they hiss angrily with their lips quivering, showing their teeth as they gave off killer intent which frightened Masaru and Ryumaru a little and draw their swords. The others were a little unnerved by their appearance. Therefore, this is what that girl was talking about, Masaru thought with realization of what they looked like. Then, with amazing speed, they jumped up into the trees and flew down towards them with a shriek. Masaru and Ryumaru leapt back, as they landed only to be tackled by them with lightning speed. Before the group could do anything, Mikaru and Ayaka leapt away from them. They then saw Masaru and Ryumaru spew a large fireball from their mouths, which engulfs the human xenomorph hybrids. When the flames finally were extinguished, Mikaru and Ayaka were nowhere to be seen. Mikaru, Ayaka, Yukiko cried, as she feared the worst. Suddenly Masaru and Ryumaru gasped in pain as a bladed tail nched out through the chests by Mikaru and Ayaka. Yukime gasped with surprise and happiness that they were still alive. However, she was a little horrified and grossed out by the stunt they did. Mike, Aru and Ayaka slowly brought the two to their face. They screamed in true terror as Mikaru and Ayaka opened their mouths wide with a hiss, showing their inner jaws that opened up, and thrust them into Masaru and Ryumaru's skulls like a piston, which broke them, killed them both instantly as they could only muster out a final cry of horror. Mikaru removed his tail from Masaru's chest violently causing him to drop to the ground. Ayaka did the same with Ryumaru. They both hissed with glee at their brothers' corpses. Goodbye Nichans. Oh, and don't worry, we'll put your eyes to good use in the future. They both then lifted their heads up high as they let out a high-pitched inhuman screech. As their chakra reserves started to deplete, both Mikaru and Ayaka transformed back to their human forms. Once they were back to normal, Itachi and Kisame appeared before them and kicked them in the chest, sending the duo flying into the forest. The Konoha shinobi and Yukime then gave chase to find the two. Mikaru and Ayaka were able to get to their feet, but they both accidentally looked up into Itachi's eyes and became caught in his dusk crow genjutsu. Once inside, Itachi told them everything that had happened in Konoha and the truth about him and the Uchiha massacre, since we believe he can trust them. They both took it very well considering how it happened. In turn, Mikuru and Ayaka explain what happened in their time in Kiri and up until now. The genjutsu then ended with Itachi have them promise to try to protect someone important to him to the best of their abilities. When they were finished, the Konoha shinobi and Yukime showed up and they stared at the duo that still had their Sharingan active, panting hard from the genjutsu casted by Itachi Uchiha. Currently, Kisame and Itachi were walking down the dirt road. They all come by back to their rendezvous point to inform their leader on what had transpired here. Daisuke approached with Yukime and she asked, "Are the both of you alright, Mikuru-kun, Ayaka-chan?" "Yeah, I think so," they replied, panting heavily, then looked at him in the eye as they deactivated their Sharingan. Daisuke smiled for a moment before he gasped when he saw someone appear behind them. The figure then threw kunai at the two. "Mikuru, Ayaka, look out!" he yelled as he raced towards them. Surprised, they both turned around and two kunai punctured their black eyes. Time seemed to stop short for Mikuru and Ayaka as their world turned black. They could scream or yell, as the shock was too much. They started to fall backwards when the Chunin caught them. "Mikuru-kun, Ayaka-chan!" Daisuke and Yukime cried in horror. They all looked back to see Ryumaru was still alive, but only barely, with Masaru. He had blood running out of his mouth with a hole in his chest and head. Holding his chest, he laughed before saying, weakly, "Consider that a farewell present from us, my Ikuru, Ayaka." They then fell to their knees for a moment before falling to the ground lifeless. The Konoha shinobi and Yukiko turned back to Mikuru and Ayaka and saw at their eyes to see kunai protruded from their eyes straight through the iris. Daisuke pulled the kunai out of Mikuru and Ayaka's eyes while Kakashi checked their brother's pulse to make sure that they were finally dead. After confirming that they were both dead, he then ran to Mikuru and Ayaka's eyes as Daisuke finished checking their pulse. Their pulse is strong, their chakra network is low on chakra, but is otherwise fine. However, their eyes are destroyed beyond repair. We need to get the to the medical corps as soon as possible, Daisuke explained to Kakashi, who nodded before turning to his teammates yelling, "Yugao, Tenzo, bring those two's bodies with us. We'll need their eyes to be transplanted into them." "Yes, Kakashi senpai," they replied before going over to Masaru and Ryumaru's bodies and hoisted them onto their shoulders. "Okay, let's get moving," Daisuke said as he picks him up and they raced to the hospital. In Konoha, Kakashi looked down at the boy and the girl who was being carried by the Chunin as they raced to hospital. "I do not know what that chakra we saw back there was. But I do know that that was the Sharingan and Mangekyo Sharingan in their eyes a moment ago. These children are something else. Man, what they have been through must have been hard. I had better keep an eye on them though. I hope the operation is a success," he thought as they ran inside the hospital. They all raced inside and began looking for a doctor. Quickly they had the doctors examine both Mikuru and Ayaka. Everyone was surprised that the wounds had already started to heal, but they were still in trouble. They took them to the operating room and implanted Masaru's eyes into Mikuru and Ryumaru's into Ayaka. They then carried them away into the rehabilitation room. The doctors placed Mikuru and Ayaka's unconscious forms with warping around the eyes onto two separate beds. Kakashi and Daisuke later left the hospital and went to the Hokage residence to inform the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, on what had happened as well as what they had seen in the battle outside the walls of Konoha. Konoha Hospital. Mikuru and Ayaka have been resting peacefully in the Konoha hospital for a week now. Mikuru slowly opened his eyes and noticed his eyes were bandaged up. He then remembered what happened after Itachi's genjutsu ended and knew he had eye transplants. He closed his eyes and sat up quickly, in which he noticed that he had a new ability now. He could see without eyes now. He scanned his new surroundings and noticed immediately that he was in a hospital. He then realized something was on his legs and looked to see Yukime sleeping on his legs. "Must have been very worried about us," he thought with warm smile. He also looked over to the other bed and saw Ayaka sleeping peacefully with bandages over her eyes, too. He then relaxed and looked at his left arm, which was bandaged. "But I felt it was already somewhat healed due to his abilities given to him by the xenomorphs. He still could not believe it. At last, they were finally at peace and no one was going to hurt them anymore. A single tear rolled down his cheek through the cloth. I hope things get better from now on, he thought as he then recalled what Itachi told them back in the forest. Flashback. Mikaru and Ayaka soon found themselves once again in a void of violet, blue, and pink with a torrent of crows cawing all around them. They both looked around frantically trying to figure out where they were. This place is, they thought as they looked around. Suddenly, they saw a group of crows merge together to form a tattered Itachi Uchiha. He stared at them with a gentle smile and said, "Relax Mikaru-kun, Ayaka-chan. I brought you into this genjutsu to talk to you." They both looked at each other in surprise. They never thought that Itachi, the one that wiped out the Uchiha clan in one nig, would want to speak with them peaceful. Is this some kind of joke? Mikaru asked as he and Ayaka turned the gaze back at Itachi. Itachi shook his head side to side while saying, "You two have good instincts as shinobi, but no. I am not messing with you. From what I saw you two can do and acted, I believe I can trust you with the information I am about to give you. I wish to explain the events that led up to the Uchiha family downfall. This caused the twins a lot of shock. Here is a person they just met just complimented their caution of him and wishes to shed light on the Uchiha's annihilation by his hands no less." They shared another look and nodded to each other before staring back at Itachi. "Okay Itachi-san, tell us what happened with the Uchiha," they both said simultaneously. Ida. Kai then stared to explain it following the Nine Tails attack on Konoha. Konoha's leadership began to suspect that an Uchiha was behind the attack because of the Sharingan has the ability to control the nine-tailed demon fox. In order to keep an eye on the Uchiha, they were forced to live in a corner of the village and kept under surveillance, creating dissent within the clan. When members of the clan began planning a coup d'état, they tasked Itachi with spying on Konoha from within the Anbu. However, his pacifistic nature led him to become a double agent, instead providing Konoha with information on the Uchiha. He knew that if the suppressed, but powerful, Uchiha were to attack Konoha, the resulting civil war would weaken the village in all aspects. This sign of weakness would entice her countries to take advantage and invade Konoha, with the conflict eventually escalating into another shinobi world war. As the Uchiha came closer to a village-wide revolt, the third Hokage attempted to open negotiations with them. Unfortunately, time ran out and Hiruzen's advisors ordered Itachi to slaughter his entire clan. Prior to the massacre, Itachi confronted Madara Uchiha, who had infiltrated the village. Believing him to be the Madara who had decades earlier been shunned by the clan, still held resentment for both the Uchiha and Konoha, Itachi offered Madara the chance to help him take his revenge against the clan. In exchange for promising not to attack Konoha, a deal which Madara accepted. The Uchiha clan, however, was not completely blind towards Itachi's double agent status. They began to suspect him. Several months after Itachi had joined the Anbu, due to his change in behavior, they ordered Shisui Uchiha, Itachi's closest friend, to keep an eye on him. However, Shisui later turned up dead, seemingly committing suicide by drowning. The clan suspected that Itachi might have had something to do with this death, including the possibility of having forged the suicide note. Because of this, along with Itachi acting as though entering the Anbu was nothing special, the clan began to become antagonistic towards Itachi. Indeed, Itachi had murdered Shisui in order to obta in his Mangekyo Sharingan and had forged the suicide note. However, he denied involvement at the time and due to his mission of stopping the rebellion being secret, he instead acted disrespectful towards his clansmen. As though he was beginning to lose faith with the clan's incessant need for their rules and regulations. However, Itachi revealed to Mikaru and Ayaka that he did not in fact kill Shisui, but instead aided him in his orchestrating his death, as Shisui was also a firm believer in maintaining the peace and prosperity of the village. Even Fugaku Uchiha, the clan head, and Itachi's father, had lost hope in Itachi altogether, and the two had a falling out. Then on that night, Itachi, with Madara's help, killed every member of the Uchiha clan, killing his own parents last, which was the hardest thing he had ever done. Itachi's little brother, Sasuke, returned that night late from his own training to find Uchiha corpses littering the streets. When he found Itachi standing over their parents' bodies, Sasuke demanded to know who had done such horrible deeds, but was interrupted as Itachi threw a shuriken at his shoulder, calling him foolish. Itachi then used Tsukuyomi on Sasuke, which showed him that Itachi was the one who murdered the clan. Realizing what had happened, Sasuke tried to run away. Itachi stopped him and told him he was not worth killing, instead encouraging him to get strong enough to take revenge. Even though Sasuke later remembered they had a small fight, which activated Sasuke's Sharingan for the first time, and ended with Sasuke losing an Itachi Defa. Ct-ing from the village with tears in his eyes. In reality, Itachi was defying orders by not killing Sasuke, his brother's life meaning more to him than anything. He hoped that by sparing Sasuke and making him live a life of vengeance, Sasuke would someday kill him to avenge their family. He asked Hiruzen to look out for Sasuke and to hide the truth of the events surrounding the massacre. Itachi also threatened the Konoha Council and Danzo in particular, not to lay a finger on Sasuke or else risk him going public with everything he knew. Itachi left the village and joined Akatsuki to keep Kono safe from the organization until the day that Sasuke would come looking for him. And that about covers it, Itachi said as he finished. The twins were speechless to say the least. Neither of them thought they could go through what Itachi did and remain pure-hearted. They both then explained what happened to them in Water Country and up to now. Afterwards, Ayaka had to ask Itachi something. Itachi-nichan, how could you bear to go through with it? And what about Sasuke? How do you know that he will even turn out right after such an ordeal? Ayaka asked with tears in her eyes. Itachi was taken aback by being called older brother but smiled. Warmly but sadly, it wasn't easy. Nevertheless, the life of a shinobi never is. I just did what I could at the time at hand. And with Sasuke I do not really know. I can only just hope that he follows the right path. Itachi-nichan, if it gives you some comfort, we can look after your Ototo for you. I cannot guarantee we can succeed in protecting him, we can at least try. For your sake, Mikuru proclaimed as he crossed his right arm over his chest and bumped his chest with his chest. Itachi gasped in shock and surprise at Mikuru proclaim but smiled as he said with a small bow of his head, "Thank you Mikuru, Ayaka. It gives me great comfort that Sasuke is safe under your watch. It's the least we can do for the sacrifice you've made for my father's home. Just keep us in the loop on the Akatsuki, okay? From what I saw with our older brothers, they are going to be bad news down the road," Mikuru said sincerely but became serious at the last part. To which Itachi can understand and he simply nodded, "I will when I can." The genjutsu began to deteriorate as Itachi said, "Before I end the genjutsu, I must ask you not to tell this to anyone. The girl with you is fine but no one else, okay? Only the Hokage and the elders know the truth about the event. Oh, and watch over Naruto for me, if you can. The Akatsuki will be after him eventually for what he contains. Just ask the Hokage, he'll tell you what I mean. With that, I will leave you in the hands of Konoha. Take care and farewell." Itachi finished as he and the Genjutsu vanished, leaving them kneeling on the ground panting. End of flashback. Mikuru had already reawaked from reminiscing about his and his sister's meeting with Itachi. He's stir-woken Yukime up and she gasped with happiness. "Mikuru-kun, you're awake." She cried as she hugged him with all her heart and sobbed over his shoulder. "Mikuru-kun." A warm smile appeared on his face upon knowing someone cared for him deeply. Despite only knowing each other for a few weeks, they grew a bond that was deeper than friendship. "Yukime-chan," he said with a caring voice that was filled with love. Suddenly, the door opened and an old man wearing a red and white robe and a red hat with fire in kanji on it, the Chunin who rescued him and his sister, and the Anbu with gray hair and the sharing. And in his left eye which was now covered walked into their room and stopped next to his bed. Mikuru turned to them as the elder spoke. "Good morning, how are you feeling today, son?" The old man asked. "Okay, I guess," Mikuru replied with shrug, "I can still see, and just not with my physical eyes." The old man smiled as he remembered what Kakashi and Daisuke told him earlier yesterday. "Well then, looks like the transplant was a success. So whose eyes did you use for it?" Mikuru asked. "Your older brother's eyes, we had them put them for both of you since you all had the same blood type," the Chunin answered. "That's good," Mikaru said lightly before asking the old man, "You must be the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, right?" The old man blinked in surprise. "What makes you say that?" he asked. "The hat you're wearing has the words, 'Fire,' written on it, and only the Hokage wears that hat," Mikaru said, pointing at the hat the old man was wearing. The old man just laughed. "Why yes, I am the third Hokage, and this is Kakashi Hatake and Daisuke Hyuga," the old man said, moving his hand towards the Anbu, who just nods, then the Chunin next to him, who also nods. "What's your name, boy?" Hiruzen asked. "Mikaru." Mikaru answered. "Mikaru Uchiha." The Hiruzen and Kakashi looked at each other shocked. "And the two girls?" Kakashi asked. Mikaru nodded and points at each one. "She's my twin little sister, Ayaka Uchiha. And she is Yukime Yuki, a friend we made on our way to Fire Country." By the sound of her name, Ayaka woke up, sat up in the bed, and looked around, confused on where she is. She felt scared until she looked over to Mikaru's bed and saw him, Yukime, Hiruzen, Daisuke, and Kakashi looking at her. She felt safer when she saw Mikaru and made a smile. He just so happened to have saved two young members of the Uchiha clan. How very fortunate. Maybe they can help turn the clan around. Hiruzen, Daisuke, and Kakashi then introduced themselves to Ayaka. AKA gasped in surprise when Hiruzen said he was the third Hokage. Kakashi and Hiruzen turned back at him. "So, do you have any parents?" Kakashi asked, curious. That struck Mikaru and Ayaka hard as tea. Had made them remember that their parents are died. He looked down, shook my head, and said, "Yes." "What are their names?" Hiruzen asked. "Ichiro Uchiha and Masaki Uzumaki," Mikaru answered in a low voice. All of the adults' eyes widen in surprise and shock. "Wait, you're Ichiro's children?" Daisuke asked in shock. "I cannot believe it. I saved my friend's children." Mikaru and Ayaka nodded confused. "Yes. Why do you ask?" "Because Ichiro was my best friend," Daisuke answered. Mikaru and Ayaka's eyes widen. "So, you're Tochin's closest friend. And so is the member of the Hyuga clan," Hiruzen added. "He was one of your father's most trusted friends, Daisuke Hyuga. So your full names would be Mikaru and Ayaka Uzumaki Uchiha?" Kakashi asked. "Yeah," they replied. "So, where are they now?" "They didn't come with you?" Hiruzen asked, curious. They both turned away with misery, and Mikaru said sadly, "No, they're both dead." The adults looked at each with a shocked look. What happened?" Daisuke asked. Mikaru then looked down as tears soaked the bandage and some ran down his cheeks. He could not hold it in any longer, so he closed his eyes and cried, "They're dead because of us. They died because we had a Kekkei Genkai, and villagers of Kiri fear people with them because they believe that we will bring about another war and misfortune. So when they found out we possessed one, they tried kill Ayaka and me. Our parents tried to protect us but died in the process. Even our two best friends tried to as well. We then took revenge on the villagers that killed them and fled to here. Yukime-chan lost her parents the same way ours did." They slowly removed their bandages, opened their eyes, and looked up at them, sniffling with their now eternal Mangekyo Sharingan activated. They both still had 3 tomos formed into a ring, but Mikaru's had 8 triangles around his ring while Ayaka's had 8 blades, 1 between each junction and 1 on each tomo. They stared at it with no fear, but shock and surprise. Kakashi shook his head, as he felt sorry for them. Poor kids, for them to have to kill at a young age and even to lose the ones that were precious to them. Ikaru then closed his eyes after deactivating the Mangekyo and crying heavily, tears soaking his bed sheets. As he cried, Mikaru felt someone hug him. He opened his eyes to see the old man hugging me, and as a result, he stopped crying and stared in shock. "Mikaru, I understand your pain. It wasn't your fault that you have a Kekkei Genkai. You shouldn't have been feared and attacked for it. However, here in Konoha, we do not fear ones for having a Kekkei Genkai. People here will respect you here for having it. You are safe here in Konohagakure no Sato, your new home, Mikaru," Sarutobi said as he embraced him. At first, Mikaru was surprised, but now had tears of joy as the Sarutobi finished, making him felt all warm inside. "Thank you, Hokage-sama," Mikaru said, closed his eyes. A tear of happiness ran down his face. Hokage-sama, can I ask you something? Mikuru asked after they released from the hug. What is it, Mikuru? Sarutobi asked. Mikuru then lifted my head and asked, can we become Konoha shinobi? We want to make our parents proud. Sarutobi laughed and said, yes. Of course you can, but you need to tell us what skills and abilities besides the Sharingan you two already have first. Mikuru frowned at that. He did not want to talk about his and his sister's abilities, so he just said, okay. I know Yukime-chan can use some ice release techniques and is skilled with every ninja throwing weapon. Well, I don't really know about mine or Ayaka's skills or abilities besides the Sharingan, Mangekyo Sharingan, fire release techniques, and Uzumaki chakra chains, but I know someone who will. Sarutobi and Kakashi just stared at each other, then back at Mikuru and raising their eyebrows. Who'd that be? They both asked together. Mikuru closed his eyes and I led as he stepped down off the bed in front of them, causing them to stand up and back up a bit, giving him some room. We need to go to the roof first, Mikuru explained, and the twins wrapped the bandages around their eyes before all four of them went to the roof of the hospital. Konoha Hospital rooftop. Mikuru bit his thumb, draw some blood, did the hand signs, boar, dog, bird, monkey, and ram before slammed his hand on the floor. Ninja art. Summoning technique. Clouds of smoke appear before them. Sarutobi and Kakashi were shocked to what was going on. What the? A summoning? Sarutobi thought with surprise. Very interesting. So, he can perform the summoning technique in such a young age. She will explain everything, Mikuru said as the smoke started to clear. When the smoke cleared, Irionkohi, the xenomorph queen, appeared before them. She looked around the rooftop and saw Mikuru. Oh Mikuru, is it time for the meeting? She asked in calm, but happy voice. The N noticed Mikuru and Ayaka had bandages around their eyes and had Yukiko with the pair, who trembled at her non-visible stare. Oh Mikuru, Ayaka, what happened to your eyes and who is this? Well, sort of. We had a run-in with our traitorous older brothers on the way to Konoha, Mikuru said sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head as Irionkohi nodded from the explanation, and this is Yukime Yuki. We met her after our parents were killed by the villagers. Irionkohi's face saddens upon hearing this. I'm sorry to hear that. And it's a pleased to meet you, Yukime-chan. Yukime just nodded nervously. Irionkohi, can you explain everything to the third Hokage, Daisuke, and Kakashi? Mikuru asked with a smile. Sure thing, Mikuru-kun, she answered, returning the smile as she turned to face the three men before her. Both Daisuke and Kakashi were surprised and frightened by her appearance, but Sarutobi after a moment remembered who she is. Wait a minute, you're one of those creatures that I saw Hashirama-sensei summoned years ago, he said in shock and surprise. Irionkohi turned to him, then looked him over and sniffed him. Sarutobi-chan, is that you? She asked before saying with a chuckle, wow, you sure have gotten old. And you are the Hokage. What do you know? I guess a lot has changed while I have been away. Indeed, Irionkohi-sama, Sarutobi said with a laugh. Last time I saw you were just before the beginning of the First Great Shinobi World War. I was elected third Hokage at the end of the First Great Shinobi World War. Mikuru and Ayaka looked back between both of them and asked, you know each other? They nodded and said, yes. I met him a few times in the past. Back then, he was one of the students of the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju. The Hokage laughed and said, yup. And look at me now. I became the strongest Hokage that ever lived, even though I should be retired right now. Irionkohi chuckled and said, the other two, relax. I am not going to hurt you unless you give me a good reason to do so. My name is Irionkohi. I am the xenomorph queen that gave Mikuru and Ayaka their unique abilities. They summoned me here to explain the situation to you. Okay, let's hear it then, Sarutobi said with a nod. Irionkohi nodded and explained everything to the Hokage and Kakashi. When she was done explaining, Sarutobi just nodded, I see. So Mikuru and Ayaka processes the Kekkei Genkei of both the Uzumaki and the Uchiha clans, am I right? Irionkohi nodded, yes, that's right. And I believe that with the amount of time they spent with Yukime They may have also happened to have the ice release Kekkei Genkai due to their new limited ability to absorb a person's chakra and DNA from skin or blood contacted with others and fuse it their own. They can then learn new techniques from other clans and their Kekkei Genkai, due to being part xenomorph now. However, we will worry about that later. Anyways, they should be trained on how to use their clan's abilities. Sarutobi nodded and asked, "So, what do you propose we do?" "Well, you can give him and his Imoto to the Ninja Academy to learn to become shinobi and have them train to master their Kekkei Genkai and techniques. Have Yukime improve her shinobi skills and her bloodline limit powers. I will also assure you that without a doubt, they will never betray Konoha without cause." She then raised a finger because she almost forgot to mention something. "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that they're mastered the Sharingan to the fullest before they arrived here. We know Irionko Hisama." Kakashi finally spoke up. "We also know they possess the Mangekyo Sharingan. They were able to use a completely formed Susanoo shortly while they transformed into xenomorphs, right?" Sarutobi nodded to him when he asked. "Yes, that's correct." "Really? Irionko?" he asked with surprise and interest. "Let me see it." Quote, Mikaru and Ayaka then undid the bandages around their eyes, and then activated their Mangekyo, and Irionko he stared at them for a moment. She then turned to Sarutobi and asked, "Did they get eye transplants?" Sarutobi nodded. "Yes, Irionko Hisama. Their origin. All ones were destroyed from being pierced by kunai thrown by their older brothers after their fight with them." "How did you know?" "I can smell a faint scent of blood coming from their eyes." "Whose eyes did you use?" "Our older brothers. We fought them outside the village wall on our way here," Mikaru answered. "They also possessed the Mangekyo. They destroyed our eyes before they died." Irionko he stared to them surprised and stared at them again. If she had eyes, they would be wide open. "Interesting. Very interesting," Irionko he said as she finished examining their eyes. "What do you mean, Irionko Hisama?" Sarutobi asked. "They now possess the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. There was only one other person in history that also possessed the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. And that was Madara Uchiha." Irionko he explained. Then Mikaru and Ayaka deactivated the Mangekyo, revealing their now violet eyes of their brothers. And it is quite possible they can evolve their Sharingan into the Rinnegan, but only time will tell. It'll be best that I keep this little bit of information to myself for the time being. The third Hokage looked at the pair surprised, then turned back to face Irionko he. "Okay, I will see if the other clan leaders will train Mikaru, Ayaka, and Yukiko." "Oh, and what is their last name going to be?" Sarutobi asked. "Their last name will be Uchiha for now, but later they can change it. Something like Uchuhenka. Or better yet, they reform the ancient Otsutsuki clan, since they have both the Uzumaki Senju and Uchiha blood running through their veins. If they chose to go by either name, they can form the Uchuhenka or Otsutsuki clan when he is 18 years old, and Mikaru can have 5 wives to start his clan. Ayaka can carry on the Uchuhenka or Otsutsuki name if he wants, or the name of her husband when she marries," Irionko he stated. Sarutobi nodded. "Okay. I will make a record of this in case I'm not alive till then and if there's a new Hokage in my place." Irionko he also nodded and said, "Very well. I will leave Mikaru Uchiha, Ayaka Uchiha, and Yukime Yuki in your hands, and if you need to ask me anything, have Mikaru summon me. Farewell." When Irionko he disappeared into a cloud of smoke, Sarutobi walked over to Mikaru, Ayaka, and Yukime and said, "Mikaru, Ayaka, Yukime, come with me and Daisuke. We are going to find you two a family that will adopt you, and the day after tomorrow will be your entrance ceremony at the academy." They both smiled with tears of joy. "We are going to become ninja." They then went with the third Hokage and Daisuke out of the hospital, thought the village to the Hokage residence, while Kakashi went the other direction and disappeared from sight. At the Hokage residence, once they were inside, Sarutobi told us to wait in the lobby until he was done with his meeting with the Konoha Council. He soon went down the hall and disappeared, allowing them to think about what he told them on the here about someone who could be an ideal friend. Inside the council room, Sarutobi sat in front of the top jonin of Konohagakure with his former teammates, Homura Mitokado on his left and Kaharu Utatane on his right. Sarutobi decided to break the silence. I'm sure you are wondering why you're all here. An incident happened a week ago which involves two members of both the Uchiha clan and Uzumaki clan. Gasps were heard from a Jonin. One of them spoke to another. What? An Uzumaki and Uchiha offspring? How is that possible? One of them chose to spoke. What happened, Hokage-sama? The youngest children of Ichiro Uchiha, who was thought to have died during the Third Great Shinobi World War, and a woman named Masaki Uzumaki have come here with a girl from the Yuki clan from Water Country after their parents had fallen victim to the bloodline limit discrimination there. Their names are Mikuru and Ayaka, Uzumaki Uchiha and Yukime Yuki. There were gasps of shock and surprise. A voice then spoke up, he's dead. Air children came here all by themselves. Sarutobi nodded and continued, yes, but there's more. A few miles away from the main gate, the twins were ambushed by the older siblings, Masaru and Ryumar. Yu Uzumaki Uchiha and their group of missing nin. There was a battle that raged out and was joined by a Hyuga Chunin and a squad of Anbu. They won battle, but at the cost of Mikuru and Ayaka's eyes. Of their missing nin older brothers threw kunai into their eyes before he died. Many of the Jonin's eyes widened in shock and horror, and some even gasped in shock. But there is good news, Sarutobi stated. We transplanted their brothers' eyes into their eye sockets and was successful. After a few days of recovery, they have wakened this morning. They are in go health. That's good to hear, a Jonin said. Homura then asked, what is their fate, Hiruzen? Turning to him, Sarutobi said, for now, we're going to have them live with the apartment next to Sasuke Uchiha. Is that wise, Sarutobi? Kaharu asked. Turning to her, Sarutobi said, yes Kaharu. They may help with lessen the problems created from the Uchiha clan downfall. Besides, they have learned a long-lost summoning contract. That hasn't been seen since the first Hokage's reign. This caused some gasps among the Jonin. One asked, is this true, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi turned to the Jonin and nodded, yes, as I have seen it myself. They can summon an extraterrestrial race from beyond the stars called xenomorphs. They used to be endoparasitic, where they breed by using hosts. However, they had been modified with our own DNA to give them the ability to speak in a more successful reproductive system. I have spoken to the xenomorph queen and she told me more of their abilities. The twins have been given the DNA of the xenomorphs, giving them enhanced senses, reinforced bones, acidic blood, increased healing rates, and incredible night vision capabilities. Many of the Jonin was completely shocked by all this. And that's not all. They have the limited ability to absorb chakra and blood from personal contact and exposure and fuse it to their own DNA, meaning they can obtain other bloodlines and learn techniques from other clans. But, as I said before, this ability is limited. They also have the ability to transform in a half and full xenomorph in what they called xenomorph mode. It is similar to how Jinchuriki transform into their tailed beast mode. Wow, they could form their own clan if they wanted to, a Jonin said, causing some Jonin to nod in agreement. That might happen in the distant future, but for now, we'll stay with the Uchiha and be trained to hone their abilities. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Mikuru and Ayaka suddenly were awoken by the sound their names being called. They turned to see Sarutobi approaching then. Mikuru, Ayaka, Yukime, let's get you some new clothes and where you will be living, Sarutobi explained. Hi, Mikuru, Ayaka, and Yukiko replied as they stood up. And with that, Mikuru and Ayaka left the Hokage residence. At Itachi and Sasuke's training spot, after they got some fresh new cloths, they arrived at a small treeless spot in one of the forests in the village with a large rock in the center. There were 8 targets scattered all over the clearing, including one behind the rock. They all practiced nailing with targets with kunai, shuriken, and senbon. This was the place that Itachi hinted for them to help hone their skills. Yukime got it down on the first try. The twins took 2 tries to get it right. They spend the rest of the afternoon honing their other abilities expect of the twins' xenomorph mode. All while doing it, they noticed 2 people were watching them as different spots, but could care less who they were. After a while of watching, they both leave without revealing themselves. As night fell, the trio left to their apartment. On their way, they thought back to what the Hokage told them about this Naruto. Flashback. Mikaru, Ayaka, and Yukime were on our way to inside the Hokage residence with the Hokage after we left the hospital. The twin told him about their encounter with Itachi and that he told the truth about the clan's destruction. Hiruzen was surprised Itachi would tell the two. However, with their abilities and willpower, he could understand why. Added to the fact that he assigned them to look about Sasuke and Naruto as well. This made Hiruzen concerned that people might be after Naruto and what he contains. Hokage-sama, will we be able to make now friends here? Mikaru said nervously. He turned his head and said with a smile, of course, Mikaru. You three will have many friends here. Is there anyone in particular? Ayaka asked curiously with a nervous smile. He said with a hand to his chin. Deep in thought, there is one that I would consider who is also in need of a friend. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said off the tip of his tongue. Why is he in need of a friend? They asked. Sarutobi sighed before answering, because he's all alone. He has no parents or family of his own. He can't get many friends because many people fear him. Why is that? Mikaru asked with curiosity. Is it because of what he contains inside him like Itachi mentioned? Sarutobi took a long sigh then turned to us and said in a serious tone, yes it is. Now what I am about to tell you is forbidden. An S-rank secret. Can you two keep this a secret? They nodded and said, of course we can. Something that is forbidden is meant to forbidden. Sarutobi smiled and nodded before continuing. You both know the story about how the fourth Hokage defeated the nine-tailed demon fox 7 years ago, right? Yeah, our parents told us about what they heard about it when we were younger, Mikaru said. Well, the truth is that the fourth Hokage couldn't defeat the nine tails. It was too powerful. Instead, he sacrificed himself and sealed it into a newborn baby, Naruto, his own son, he said with a serious look in his eyes. What? Why you mean? They shouted in surprise. Sarutobi nodded then said, yes, the fourth Hokage is Naruto's father and that he sealed the beast inside Naruto. As you possibly well knew, only the villagers who fought the Nine Tails 7 years ago know that the monster is sealed inside Naruto. I ruled that no one should speak about that incident. I have severely punished those who have broken this rule. Now our children know nothing about it. That is the only positive development for Naruto. Before the fourth Hokage trapped the monster and died his last wish for the villagers to regard Naruto as a hero. A hero? They asked surprised. Sarutobi nodded again and continued, the fourth Hokage sealed the monster into the navel of a Nubo RN baby whose umbilical cord had just been cut. As the receptacle for the nine-tailed demon fox, Naruto saved the village. Unfortunately, the other villagers did not see him like that. Some even say that Naruto is the nine tails. Little by little, that attitude has been passed down to their own children. Mikaru, Ayaka, do you know? Sarutobi asked. What? They asked. When someone is hated and people refuse to accept his existence, he sees it in the eyes of the people around him, he said as they listened and stared at him in shock and sadness. So, do you two think Naruto is the demon, do you? Sarutobi asked in a serious tone. They shook our head and said, no, of course not. He can tell the difference. I believe he's a hero like the fourth said. Sarutobi nodded with a smile, happy to hear what they just said. Oh, but I have one question, Hokage-sama, Mikaru asked. What is it, Mikaru? Sarutobi answered back. What happened to Naruto's mother? Sarutobi sighed then said, his mother died during childbirth. I'm sorry to say. They felt sorry for Naruto to live with knowing anything about his parents. Hokage-sama, Mikaru asked again. What is it now, Mikaru? He asked a little annoyed. I was wondering, if Naruto asked about this, should I tell him? I mean, he has the right to know. You're right. If Naruto asked you about everything we talked about here today, you can. But only if it's a good situation. I will entrust you two to make sure that he don't take it the wrong way and that Naruto is the only one to tell anyone else about his secret. Do you two understand? He asked. Full well, Hokage-sama, they replied. Good, he said with a nod. Once inside, Sarutobi told them to wait in the lobby until he was done with his meeting with the council. He soon went inside and the doors closed behind him, allowing them to think about what he told them on the here about Naruto who could be an ideal friend. End of flashback. At the trio's apartment. They got to their apartment. Gone into our bedroom, and went to bed while remembering what Itachi said earlier and what Mikaru and Ayaka said he said to them. Before I end the genjutsu, I must ask you not to tell this to anyone. The girl with you is fine but no one else, okay? Oh, and watch over Naruto for me, if you can. The Akatsuki will be after him eventually for what he contains. Ask the Hokage, he will tell you what I mean. With that, I will leave you in the hands of Konoha. Take care and farewell. I could not believe it. We are going to be just like Itachi Nichin when he was our age. Mikaru thought before he and the others closed their eyes and went to sleep. They fell asleep knowing that tomorrow they start at the academy. In addition, the day that they start to walk down the path of the shinobi. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.